Welcome back to Napp Motorsports. I am not Stefan. Stefan's behind the camera. I'm Corey. This is my 91 very turbo Miata. This is my 2008 NC1 I bought to be a daily driver, not be a turbo car, something turnkey reliable. Not that this isn't, but it has the problems that any car does with 3 times the power it was meant to have. This car was meant to be the perfect daily driver. Suspension, intake, maybe an exhaust down the line, just something turnkey, great to drive. But as things go, this is a disco potato. We are going to be installing an FMNC turbo kit for this car. Can't leave anything alone. I got the pleasure to drive one of the FM demo cars, and it was just exceptional. And instantly, I knew that this car just needed that little bit of spice. So we are going to be installing the small compressor housing, keep it somewhat daily friendly, just instant power and torque, reliability. So I guess I'll have 2 turbo Miatas that are both green.
I'm Stefan. Corey's not behind the camera. And as he said, we're going to turbo his car, his NC1. This is the 0.64 AR housing, smaller turbo kit. It's focused more on response. We're going to be kind of limited by the non-forged crankshaft that the NC1 has. And we wanted to do a kind of in-depth how-to video for you guys, even though Flyin Miata already has a really good series. More is always better. So this is starting from a mostly stock car. It has my intake on it, it has a catch can, and it has like just a Versatune tune on it. So some of the disassembly stuff will be different, but everything going forward with assembly will be relevant to your kind of build if you're starting from stock or not. And then if you have any questions, you can always bounce back and forth between Flyin Miata's videos and this one. Step 1, print the instructions. These are as of 5 days ago, so they are very up to date. It's 45 pages, just double-sided black and white, didn't take too long. And this is gonna be way nicer. The videos are really good because it gives you an actual, you can follow along, but to check off things as we go. So for example, when we get to whatever this step is, once we've done it, we'll check it off, and we're just gonna work our way through the list. That way you don't get lost, you don't miss a step, you don't whatever. And being Flyin Miata, these instructions are gonna be pretty dang good. So I've done the same thing with my K-swap, and the instructions were not good, but I know this time around we'll be in the right hands. We're gonna work through these the way they have them laid out, and that's what we're gonna show you guys here. So refer to your instructions, refer to the videos, refer to this video, and we're just gonna get started. Another important step after you print the instructions is to get a packing list and go through and physically check off everything, because the last thing you wanna do is get halfway through and realize you're missing a hose clamp or just something small that's gonna totally halt your project in its tracks. So while this looks like a lot, we know everything is here, and we'll spread it back out and we will work our way through it as we go. So there are tools and equipment that you need for this. Couple specialty things you're gonna wanna consider: a 3-inch hole saw and a 14mm Allen socket. I don't actually have one of these. I will tomorrow, but I don't have one right now. Just run through this list. This is in the instructions before you start to make sure you have everything that you need. Like jack stands, we are actually going to use a lift, but the process is going to be the same. It's just probably going to be a little easier for us. 24mm deep socket, chrome type thing, that might not be something that everybody just has in their toolbox. Laptop for tuning at the end, and just a bunch of shop supplies. We're going to go, and first thing we're going to do is take the hood off. So the hood is pretty easy. We're gonna do a little witness mark first, because hood alignment is really critical when you close it so that everything looks good. Just take a pen, paint pen, and we're going to mark, and then I do a half circle, and then you can also do it on the hood portion. That way when you take it off and put it back on, you can get it pretty much in the same spot, and it'll be close enough. And we'll do that on both sides. then we'll come this way. Didn't realize these were also aluminum.
Polish, baby.
Pro tip, take the bolts, either put them back in the hood or bag them. I have a ton of bags in my toolbox, so we're gonna, as we take things out, we're gonna label bag. I haven't done enough of these to know where all the bolts go, like an NA, so just be careful, and that way you don't get backwards with hardware and stuff like that. Next up, remove the fuel pump fuse. We wanna make sure all the pressure is out of the system, so step one is removing that fuse. Easiest way to find it is the 15 amp fuse right here. So you got your 40, 20, 10, gap, 15. I like a pair of needle nose, or you can use this tool that is actually in your fuse box. Pinch it at the bottom and pull. And then we're just gonna set this in here so we don't lose it. So now that we've removed the fuel pump fuse, we want to crank the car. It might fire up just with some residual fuel, but we want to make sure all the fuel's out of the line and it's depressurized because we're going to be removing it. So, climb in here, this ergonomic nightmare. There you go, dies on its own. It's out of fuel, key out, and ready to start taking things apart. So next step, if you're not on a lift or anything, is to actually jack up the car and put it on jack stands. This is one big jack stand, and then after that, we're gonna take the battery and undo both terminals. So they make it pretty clear. You got two open arrows here. Grab the little tab, unhook the coolant line from the side of it. And then we will be removing the battery, so you can set this aside. We won't need it. And then your battery terminals are usually a 10 millimeter. There we go. Just like that, battery's unhooked. This is kind of the section that's gonna be a little bit different if your car is stock. You're gonna wanna remove the PCV hose, which in his case goes to a catch can, but normally it would run from right around here to the valve cover. So we're gonna take this off because we have to take this off, and we'll take off the catch can lines and get that whole system out of here. And then the next thing that would be part of the regular intake is to remove this evap solenoid. So this kind of slits onto some stock brackets through these flats here. We're gonna unplug it, which is this little guy right here. Depress that tab and pull. Probably easier when it's mounted to something. There we go. And then we're going to disconnect the rubber hose from this end so that we can slide this rubber grommet off. If you ever have stuck hoses, like this one is definitely gonna be stuck on there, grab it with a set of pliers, just lightly, and rotate it, and you'll hear it pop. And then you should be able to separate it. And this rubber grommet will come off. Eventually, there we go. And then you can leave that as is. If you have an NC2 or 3, you're gonna have this weird corrugated tube that runs to the firewall. That's your sound tube. You'll wanna remove that at this step as well. Flyin Miata includes a nice blank off plate for the firewall, which I'll show you in a second here. Just unbolt that, remove it entirely, you won't be using it, and then put the blank off plate into the firewall. This is the blank off plate. You can see kind of how it mounts. FM will be down, and we don't have the hole for it here, but it does go somewhere up over here on an NC2 or 3. Next up, if you have a stock airbox, or not really, you're gonna unplug your MAF, which is right here. It's this 5-pin harness. It is clipped to the stock airbox, so you'll undo the clip as well. It's kind of like right around here. Tuck that aside, and then you'll remove this airbox portion here. It's a couple 10 millimeter bolts up along the front here. Unbolt it, it'll access your filter and all sorts of stuff like that. This cannot come off until we take the bumper off, which will be later in the process. So Unplug your MAF, and then we're gonna remove the battery, which if you have an OEM setup, it is a 10 mil front and rear. Got these nifty pass-through wrenches. And then they're just J-hooks, so if you rotate them, they will come out of the bracket, and if you don't hang on to them, they will fall down. So once you get one off, you can take the other one off. Just put this together so you don't lose these. Good place to store stuff when you're doing work like this is the trunk. Typically just pile all the parts in the trunk. That way if the car moves around or you take a break or something, you're not like, oh, where's that one piece that I set on my workbench 2 weeks ago? Just good habit. This is out. We'll put it in the trunk in a minute. And then we're going to lift the battery out, which will be unbolted at this point. Just set that aside, somewhere out of the way. And then we will take the battery tray out, which if you look in here is one 10 mil bolt on the bottom corner, 2 in the middle, and then there's one kind of back under here in the back pocket there. This piece needs to come off. This is like the battery box around to get to the 4th bolt because it's under here. There is, this one broke, but there is a clip for the battery cable right here. The negative ground cable has a clip right there. So pop those two out with like a flathead. And then all I did was take a flathead and come in kind of in between the 2 layers, and then I just popped it. And that was, I couldn't do it by hand because it's just all these little clips. And then I was able to lift the thing straight up, and now I have access to the 4th bolt. Next step is going to be to unbolt the power steering reservoir, which is this really ugly yellow tank in the middle of the car. It's 2 10 mils right here that apparently weren't tight. And we're going to leave it in place, just unbolted for now. Leave the lines hooked up, leave everything hooked up, just take the 2 bolts out. Taking the washer reservoir out, this can make a mess if you're not careful, so just be a little slow about it. We're gonna undo the reservoir, we're gonna undo the lines, and we need to unhook all of this stuff from the reservoir. So we're gonna grab our trusty little tool again. If you don't have one of these, you can just use a flathead. This just makes life a little bit easier if you can get into it. And then unhook your AC line as well, it just pops out. We will undo these clips as well. So you want the washer line free. Then you have 10 mil here, 10 mil here. We're going to unclip the motor. Mazda really made these tight. So depress the little tab and then pull. Needle nose pliers work great. Just, if you push too hard, you can crack it. And then this will come up and out. We can undo the washer line here. Same method, you're just twisting it until it breaks free. And then if you leave this, we'll do a demo. If you leave this above the washer tank, it will not leak. If you put it below the washer tank, it will leak. So make sure you leave it above the washer line, whether you tape it up or do whatever you have to do. So this works because the highest point is higher than the fluid. Doesn't matter where the end is as long as there's a loop that goes over the top. And then we'll set this somewhere safe. Next thing we're gonna do is take this whole everything off. So first step is to take the wiper cowls off. They have these little protective rubber caps on them. Just get underneath it with a flathead, pry it off. They are labeled, so this is P for passenger side. These are 14 millimeter bolts, I believe. We'll take the nuts off. And then the way these work is there's a little, like a, kind of a gear set, not a gear set, but it's a toothed bolt underneath. So you could put your wipers on in the wrong spot if you're not careful. So we're gonna paint mark so that when we put them back on, we know that they go in the same spot that they were, and we don't have wipers that are all over the place. Little touch paint mark. If you put it within this circle, you won't see it when it's back together. So you can go crazy there, but just a little mark, same here. We'll just go up the bolt. You can do some on the bolt head if you want. And now when we put it back together, we'll know where it needs to be. Taking the wipers off, you need to unload them. So lift up and you'll hear it pop out. If you try to take it off the other way, you'll fight the whole time. Once you've got bolts back on or nuts back on, the caps back on, take a pick or something and you're gonna wanna remove these little oval caps. There's one here and there's one on the opposite side. Flyin Miata does include new ones. These do like to break. So just be a little bit careful. You can see somebody's already been in here once. I think it was me. Just get underneath it. These didn't break because they're new. And then there's a screw there that we'll remove, and it's the same thing on the other side. Once you have those out, you're going to want to remove this piece here. Corey's is already kind of removed, but there are these little clips here that normally live inside of this weather stripping, and it is just, let's see if I can get one out quick. All it is a little clip like that, so if you can get your fingers underneath it and pinch, you can pop out the weather stripping. There's one on the side here that's kind of hard to get to. So another tip is if you pull kind of in this axis, so pull towards you, and then lift up and then push forward, you can slide it out of the groove. But you do risk breaking it, so we'll do the rest of them the proper way. Set that aside. And then this should separate. It is held in, you can see right here, there's these little clips. So if you pull forward, it will come free. And it is two pieces, so it's designed to fold. There you go. Next we're going to do is take off the strut tower bar if your car has it. I haven't seen an NC that doesn't, but I think like the sport trims and all that stuff don't. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are not standard screws, so I believe it is a 14 mil or a 13, or it's either a 14 or a 12 millimeter. In this case, it's a 13 because we replaced them. And then removal is as easy as just lifting straight up and put them in the trunk. Next thing we're gonna do is remove these just from the firewall. You don't have to discharge your AC or anything like that. So there's a 10 millimeter bolt right here. And then there's another one on the other side as well. Again, now that the AC line is loose, you want to undo this plastic clip here. If you just pull up on this tab, It might break just because it's old. There we go. Pull away from the firewall. And then if you rotate, that won't scratch your firewall. And then there's one more 10mm bolt hidden back here. And now your cooling lines will be clear of the firewall as well. We're gonna be removing this black piece here. It's like a cowl cover. It's, if you're ever doing your valve cover or anything like that, this is the same process. So pull the lines forward and clear. You might not be able to use an impact for this or with an extension. Long pause while you look at my toolbox. Ooh. So there are 2 bolts per side. In the engine bay, there are 4 bolts on the inside. So there's one right here, one right here, one right there, one right there, and then 2 more bolts on that side. And then you take this piece and out she goes. So now you'll have full access to the top of your valve cover, all that kind of stuff. You gotta do, valve cover swap, change your sensors out, anything like that. So we are on step 18 of the instructions. We've removed the cowl piece. We're gonna bring the car up, we're gonna take the front wheels off, and we're going to start the process of removing the front bumper. So we've got the car at height. Corey's gonna blast off the Kogekis. Also made by Flyin Miata. And we'll do that on both sides. So we want to get behind these fender liners to get all the bumper hardware that's up here, the corner marker lights, all that stuff. And what we're going to do is there's a bunch of these little screw pieces. It is a Phillips head. It's a little tricky sometimes, but turn it, and then all it does is it's like a quarter turn, and they pop out. So just do that. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up top, and then there's some other hardware down below that we'll cover when we get the car a little higher in the air. So underneath, there's kind of 3 pieces. This is the part of the fender that we just removed up here. There's a Phillips quarter turn here, and there's 1, 2, 3 8mm or Phillips head pieces right there. So we'll just undo those, and this section will drop. My recommendation is take this, put it on this side of the car, take that one, put it on that side of the car, because once they're on the ground, it's kind of easy to flip them, and it's just annoying. So we'll take those out, and then we're gonna undo all of these as they hold to the bumper, and we are gonna take off just the entire under tray. And then that slides down, and that is your front fender liner. There we go. Under tray is held on. There's 2 10mm up here to the frame rail. And there is 1, 2 10mm down here, 2 more Phillips, 2 more 10mm up there, and then the whole thing should drop. The ABS cable, I'll show it over here actually. The ABS cable is clipped into here, so when you lower this, either pop it off from the back or unclip the whole thing, but I would just remove it from there. So while we're under the car and it's easy. We're gonna undo the lights. So brown connector for an NC1, NC2, the fog light is also there. And then you have your corner marker, which is up here. Again, you just pinch, wiggle, there we go, and out comes that. And then we're gonna bring the car down and we're going to undo and remove the front bumper cover. Gotta have the stance. So we are halfway down and we're gonna take a pause right here. Now that we've undone the fender liner, if I can get Corey to come over here. So the bolts we want are back in here. So if you pull, this will unpop from the top cover. And then right there, if you can zoom in on those, there are two, in this case, zinc nuts. That is what's holding the bumper on. And then also right here, there is a 10 millimeter bolt that is holding the bumper. Now all that's gonna be left is this whole row of bolts up here on the top. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I lied. There's 2 more in the bumper. So if you take a pair of needle nose pliers, there is, you'll see a little cutout piece right here, kind of under the tow hook. Just grab them with pliers, pull, and then pretty much in the same spot on the passenger side, you'll have another one. And then, should come straight off. If you've ever removed an NA or an NB bumper, this is 1,000 times easier. At this point, you'll start removing the rest of your airbox. So the airbox will come into here. There's like a snorkel. Just unbolt everything related to the snorkel, remove it. And then there is a plastic tray that Corey does not have here because of this intake. And it is a couple tabs, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's a couple under the headlights, which you have to remove the headlights. There's a bolt here, quarter turn screw here, bolt here, and then another bolt down here. Headlight just lifts out. You remove the 2 quarter turn plastic tabs, put the headlights back in, and you'll be all set. That is covered in Flyin Miata's video and in the instructions, so reference those if you have a stock intake. But we are gonna go ahead, remove this not stock intake, so we'll pick you up when that's done because that's not relevant. Save your MAF, you're going to need it. So unscrew it from your airbox. So it's just 2 Allen wrenches. I think it's Phillips head on a stock car. Keep that, set that to the side. That will go in your intercooler piping later. I don't know if this is an NC1 thing, but if you have an ambient temperature sensor, it calls it out in the instructions, you have to relocate it. It would be somewhere around here. It is likely an NC2, 3 thing only, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, this car doesn't have it, but I wanted to touch base with it because it's in the instructions. So next thing, we're going up and we're gonna start taking stuff off the bottom, like exhaust and all that kind of jazz. So now that we're under the car, we're gonna remove the 3 braces, or whatever you wanna call these. This is under the oil pan. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 12 millimeter bolts. This is under the transmission. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 12 millimeter bolts. And then this goes under the PPF, and you got 4, also 12 millimeter bolts. So. For the middle brace, you can undo this side. And then just loosen these. And the brace will slide out. And then here you have a slot in the back corner, and the rest of them come all the way out. can guarantee you I'm gonna hit my head on that later. Next up, we're gonna take off the mid pipe, which is from the header all the way to the back where the muffler is. So 14 millimeter. Thankfully, Corey lives in a rust-free climate. And then back here, also 14s with an extension. That's gonna be really hot. Once you've got both of those out, you're gonna wanna take the hanger off in the middle here. You can unbolt it. I tried unbolting the ones on my car and I could never get it off no matter how much I hammered it. So one of these tools from Amazon, it's an exhaust hanger removal tool. Should do the trick if we can get it scooched over far enough. Best $10 you'll ever spend, or whatever they cost now. Now this should never in a New York car's life has that ever worked that easily. Guarantee you, if my car was stock, you would be cutting it off. There's a donut gasket here. Let's see if we can pry that out. There we go. Donut gasket. And then the next thing we're gonna do is take the O2 sensors out. So there's one right here. We're gonna try and get into it with a 22. Oh yeah. There's 102 sensor. This is the rear. Sometimes cars care which is the pre and post cat, so make sure you separate them so you don't put one in the wrong spot. So post cat will go behind the lift. Once we get the pre cat one out, it will go in front of the lift. So I wasn't able to get the upper O2 sensor out because I don't actually have an O2 sensor socket. I will shortly. I've unplugged it from the wiring harness now, so it should be able to sneak it out without it. If not, I'll have one tomorrow and we'll be able to pull it then. But the next step is going to be to mark the bolt holes, like where the nuts line up on this cat support bracket. So we're just going to kind of go around like we did with the hood and leave a reference mark so that when we put the cat back in later, we know it's in the right spot. So we'll do that for both. And then I'm gonna try to do it for this upper one. I just don't know if I can get the right paint pen in there. Ooh, I'm stepping on Corey's toes. Okay, so all three bolts are marked. And now we can remove the bracket and we're going to loosen one other nut. So I think those are 14s. Typical cat hardware. Flyin Miata does recommend spraying everything with PB Blaster ahead of time, so you don't get into situations like this. Whoa. As it happens, the front, or I guess the rear cat stud snapped. Just happens with heat cycling. So It's all right because we can still line it up with this one and it'll be enough support for both. Then we're gonna take off, there's a 14 millimeter tucked up in here holding the bracket to the block. These long wrenches are a absolute lifesaver for this. I've already loosened it, but we'll get it loose and we will back it up. There you go, and that is your cat support bracket. You can see where we've marked the two. This one's broken, and then I also marked this one in white. It's very hard to see, but that's also slotted, so that way you know where everything has to be for everything to line up as it should. So the next thing we're gonna do while we're down here is remove the one bolt or nut that holds the engine mount to the bracket that goes to the block. So you can kind of see where the wrench goes. It is on top of this engine mount here. If you just put your hand up there, you'll feel there's only one nut. Remove it or loosen it most of the way. We're doing this so we can tip the engine later when we need to get the cat out and stuff like that. So that bolt is loose, or that nut is loose. It's just like a thread on there. That way we can't accidentally lift the engine off. We're gonna drain the oil and the coolant next. Doesn't matter the order. We are going to start with oil because it's this high and I have a nice oil drain catch. Oh, man. So we're not gonna do this while it's this high in the air because I only have a 5-gallon bucket for coolant, but there's a little Phillips head right here behind the AC condenser. That is your coolant drain. We don't have to drain all of the coolant. We just need to get it low enough that we can remove the lines that go up and over the valve cover so that we can turn those into turbo lines. So also oil drain plug, just temporarily reinstall it. This is gonna be coming out later, but you don't want it to drip all over your floor. So we're gonna bring the lift down, crack that, fill the bucket up. You could drain it all if you want, but you don't have to. Grab a big flathead or Phillips head, and it should come out pretty easily. Pro tip, if you apply upward pressure while you remove it, you will make less of a mess. If you catch it into a clean bucket and like this coolant is still good, we can reuse it for when we put the car back together, or you can just go buy new coolant, just get some Xerox premix or something like that. Coolant is drained, plug is back in. The next thing we have to do is remove this bolt here, just this one. It gets done from the underside, and I believe it holds the brake line up to the chassis, which I can't see from here, so we'll bring the car up and we'll get access to it from the bottom. So we've removed the one on the bottom. We're now gonna remove this one here on the back, which is a nut, and then this one down here, which is kind of tricky because it comes up from the bottom, but you can't access it from the bottom. So take the easy one off first. Not sure at this point what needs to be reused and what doesn't, so we'll just bag everything and then throw stuff out later. Okay, so we have removed that. We're gonna remove the top two pieces of heat shielding from the manifold. So that is talking about this piece here. So there's these very rusty 10mm bolts. There's of course one on the back. Looks like there's 5. Let's see if they play nice or not. These are not super critical if they snap because we will not be using them again. That I know for sure because we're putting a turbo in its place. Still gonna have to cut. Pretty straightforward. You have to remove both heat shields. They should just unbolt. This one got rounded out to the point where it was like actually round. So I hacked up the top one and then used an upside down hacksaw to cut the bottom one out. But that is removed. And I think we're gonna go get dinner. So we are back from dinner. Last step we had was cutting the heat shields off. Actually had to cut them. So this next step got kind of skipped because I had to remove the line to cut the heat shield. But what you want to do is fully remove this line. So there's a hard line coming off the back of the valve cover. It is just like a snap spring clip. Pop that off. Coolant will come out of here. And then we're going to remove it also from the firewall. So grab your needle nose pliers. Some coolant will come out. So next step, we're going to remove the bolted hard lines here. So these are bolted together, just a 10 mil. And then the lower line bolts to the head with a 12mm. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it's a 13. This is the weird period where Ford had some overlap. And shit is weird. So where it bolts to the head, at least on Corey's car, it is a 13mm. So this part of the instruction was a little confusing to me, so I had to watch the video, but I will show you guys in this video also. So this pipe right here that we just removed the hose from is now free. It goes to a rubber hose way back here, which ends up hooking to the metal hard line that goes to the lower radiator hose. So we want to get rid of that whole metal hard line in its entirety. So we're gonna take our long needle nose, remove the clamp, and then because you can't fit a wrench in there to break the rubber free, what the guys at Flyin Miata recommend is take yourself a long flathead screwdriver. So this is a pretty thin little guy, Milwaukee of course. And we're not gonna reuse this line. So if you damage it, it doesn't matter too much. Just kind of get the screwdriver in there to break the seal. Just work your way around a little bit. And at some point, this will not be reused. It's good practice to save the spring clamps just in case. But this guy we do not need, so this will go in the garbage. And then the fun part of this is we need to remove that coolant line from the lower radiator hard line, which is like down here. Give me the camera. Let's see if you guys can see it. So let's stick the pliers in there. There's another clamp way down here. If you just follow the rubber line down, we're gonna remove that, and then I'm gonna take the flathead, stick it in the hose, and try to break the seal from the inside. So a nice long skinny flathead would be absolutely perfect for this. So you will want a set of long needle nose straight and a set of long needle nose bent pliers. Mazda builds in these little tabs so that you are supposed to be able to kind of click it and lock it. I don't know why this one didn't lock, because that makes it really easy to remove. But once you get that free, just pull it straight up, remove it, keep it. And now we got to break that seal. So you want to make sure you don't damage that lower metal pipe. So don't like try to pick at it from the outside or anything. Small flathead, come in from the inside of the hose and just try to find the lip. And then you just want to work your way around. You're not going to reuse the rubber hose, so do not be afraid to damage it. I'm not sure if it was a screwdriver or this. Just deep buried these in here, gave it a twist after a couple pokes with a screwdriver. There was no way I was going to be able to get all the way around it, so try both. This worked well. Again, hang on to this. I don't think you need it, but you can never be too sure. So the next step is we're going to remove this guy because it would be in the way of the turbo. So it comes through this clamp here, which again, if you just so where this hooks up to the expansion tank, it is the same if you have a stock expansion tank, but slide the clamp off, break that seal off, and then the other side of this, it's a rubber hose that goes into the head. Same concept, unhook it, twist it, and pull it off the back of the head. Much easier than I thought it would go. This is what they reference as the steam vent. So the next step, whether or not you're on a lift or on the floor, Corey's making a bunch of noise, you're gonna want a jack with a block of wood, and this is where loosening that engine mount is gonna come into play. We're gonna put this on the oil pan, and as we jack the engine up, it's gonna tip it up to kind of make the header more accessible, and then we will loosen the header and remove it. So put this on the oil pan, make sure you have a block of wood. You don't want to point load the aluminum oil pan because you will crack it and break it. So block of wood will take up most of the damage. Just be mindful, at some point you will start to lift the car off either the lift or your jack stands. So when the engine stops moving, kind of like here, just stop. Otherwise you're gonna start picking it up, and that's a lot of weight on your oil pan. So what we're gonna do now is take off the nuts that hold the exhaust manifold to the head. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I believe. And then 6 is way back in there. They look like 14s, but we will confirm. They are not 14s. I've lied to the entire internet. Because this is a Ford motor. They are 15s. Pray to whoever, whatever. That guy needs a shorty. There is one more just behind runner number 4. Kind of hidden. Kind of in a shitty spot. Okay, so 6 bolts. Engine is tipped. Let's see if we can get it out without the O2 sensor removed. Old exhaust gasket comes with a new one. Probably easier to remove because it has this lip on it that would get in the way. And then there she is. For this video, we are going to be using this cat. So we will be removing these heat shields, cutting the cat off, tacking it to the new one, doing all that. So if you bought the DIY-ish kit, this video will cover all of that for you. So this gives you a good example of why you'd want the socket, because it has this heat shield that you can't get a wrench on. So we'll get a socket in there so we can remove that. We're gonna have to cut, weld, all that jazz. These heat shields we will be reusing, so we cannot take the same path we took on the other ones. So if the fasteners break, it'll be a little bit harder. We'll have to drill and tap or weld and remove. So we're gonna try and do it without breaking anything. On, if we don't have to. Not bad, all things considered. This one broke, but it's in there far enough that we should be able to drill that out and re-chase the threads. And these are all in good shape. No cuts, no nothing, so we'll put these in the pile. And then, not to get ahead of ourselves, but adapting this to the new downpipe, we'll be cutting pretty much here down off, scrapping this piece, so this needs to come off, and then welding this back onto the new downpipe. So we're back for day 2, and I want to touch on the cat before we get started. I cut the stripped threads off of this fitting here. This is still plenty. The cat support bracket is like, maybe a third of the thickness of this. And then here, it's not the most centered hole, but I tapped it for an M8, which is a little bit smaller. It's an M10 by 1.5 normally. So this is an M8 by 1.25. It's just for the support. We'll use this bolt hole to line up the marks, the witness marks and all that. And then we can kind of eyeball it there, but it will be close enough to get this lined up. So the next step is going to be doing the oil supply line to the turbo. You will want your 24 millimeter chrome socket. You can't use an impact socket because you need the thin wall of a chrome, and it has to be a deep socket. Bag 4C is the one that I'm in right now. I just threw the bag out, but it has your oil feed line, your T-fitting, the adapter for the top of the turbo, some rubber hose, 2 P-clamps, a new oil housing gasket, oil feed adapter, a bunch of zip ties, and I think that's it. So what we're gonna do is get the car up in the air, and we're going to work on the oil filter housing, which is on the driver's side rear of the motor. So oil filters here, we're gonna wanna pop this line off of the block, which is a little bit tricky. Not super crucial if that doesn't go back down. There we go. So this is the pressure sensor, this green guy here. We will unclip that. Depending how yours is installed, the clip might be on top, like this one. And then that's the sensor that we're gonna undo with the 24 millimeter. It's pretty tough to get a good angle on it. So we are going to take the 24 on a deep, and now that we have that cable out of the way, it's gonna be really hard to show you. This will just slot in over the back, counterclockwise, lefty-loosey. Might want an extension if the slave is in the way, we'll see. And this is why you want the thin wall, because there's not a lot of space in there. So next up, you're gonna grab your T-fitting and the pressure sensor, and they're pretty clear not to use Teflon tape. I'm not entirely sure why, but we're not gonna use Teflon tape either. We're gonna use this thread paste. You can just get this at your local hardware store. It is a Teflon thread paste. Just put some on there. Maybe a little more than that. And then in the T-fitting, you're gonna wanna go in the end that is in line with the male threads. And right now we're just gonna go finger tight. Like that, and then this will go into the car. So we're gonna take off the 4 bolts that hold this to the block. There's 10 millimeter bolts, there's one here, one above this, and there's 2 on the other side in the same positions. Gonna be really tough to show you. We won't actually be removing that. We just need a little bit of room so that when we thread the T-fitting in, there's enough space to get it to rotate. So I have a 10 mil with a short weeble wobble on it. That should be enough. So the forward 2 bolts are easier to get to if you remove this plate that bolts up until here. It goes next to the brake line, and then you have a direct shot with a long extension into the 2 left bolts. So this thing it's 1 1/4 turn screw here, I believe, and then this you just wiggle it out of the body. So I got the filter housing out. The upper left one, if you use a 1/4 inch deep 10 millimeter, it's small enough to kind of get around the weird nub on the top of the housing. Otherwise, you can't really get it out. So now we're gonna take this T, and I've put some thread tape on, or thread, whatever you call this, paste, on the fitting. And then they say in the instructions to make sure that no goo gets on like the first 2 threads, because you don't want it in the engine, as it would seal up things and put you in a world of hurt. So we will put it kind of close. And if you go over, just wipe it off like I just did. Take a rag. So you just want kind of the first thread or two clean, and then the rest can have thread glue on it. And again, it's gonna be really hard to show in the car, so we'll do it here. We're gonna thread it in until it's hand tight, and then you wanna take a 13mm wrench from here, do at least a full rotation. So, and then again until this is pointing directly at the driver's side wheel. We're gonna clock it later, but this gets it in so that we can bolt the fitting back up to the car. We'll put the fitting in it later and rotate it the way it needs to be. So hand tight, one full rotation, and then turn it again until it's pointing to the driver's side wheel. So we've got the fitting in. We'll grab a picture of it when that's bolted back to the block. It is pointing at the driver's side, and then we're gonna take the new gasket that FM includes, and I've sprayed this. It's not part of the instructions, but I spray it with this like copper tack spray. It just builds a really nice seal. I've cleaned everything off in there with some brake cleaner. Everything's nice and dry. And then I've put a couple dabs of blue Loctite on the screws. This has a retention piece on it. So when you put this behind the housing and you slide the bolt through it, it'll keep the gasket semi in place. And this is the proper orientation. If you look at the oil filter housing, it has this same shape on it. This would be the block side. So the whatever captive screw piece is on the top left. And then this is the pump side. So if you go, whatever, don't mount it incorrectly because you'll have a nasty oil leak. So I'm gonna install this. We'll show you guys when it's done. And the torque spec is?
15 to 22 pound-feet.
Okay, 15 to 22 foot-pounds torque to snug this thing down. So we're back after like an hour and a half, I think, maybe 2 hours. When you remove the housing from the block, the upper left piece, bolt, doesn't like to go in straight because it hits the coolant tank on top. So what's probably the proper way to do it is to put the gasket on the oil housing side, slide that bolt in, and then start to thread that in and kind of chase it with the oil filter housing, if that makes sense. That way the bolt always stays behind that piece. When I did it, I sat out here with a wrench and a bunch of extensions, and I threaded them in and it went in okay, and then all of a sudden it got really tight, and we ended up having to fully remove the housing, take the coolant lines off it, everything. I got covered in coolant, and then chase all the threads and hope to God that it held when we torqued it down, which it did, but I don't really lose my cool and I came very close. So when you remove it, just be very careful. If you have a tap or like a chaser thread set, once you have it out, you can chase it, or when you go to reinstall it, just make sure that you can thread them in by hand and that the housing is fully seated, because when I had it, if this is the block, it was kind of like this, and I didn't notice the top wasn't flush. So I thought it was flat to the housing. So make sure everything is pushed into place. Wipe everything down with acetone before you put it back together. Torque spec is 15 to 22 foot-pounds. We torqued them to 19, and they clicked right away. No weird looseness, nothing. So knock on wood, it holds. And then if it doesn't, once we're done here, we'll pull the motor and helicoil them. But I think we're good. I think we're in the clear. So I hooked the lines back up. We put the T on. So I'm going to steal the camera from Corey, and I'm going to show you what we did with the T fitting. Once I find my light. There we go. So you can see the T there is right around 10 o'clock, right there. So when you put it in, it'll be this way, and then you have to tighten it another, whatever degrees that would be, to 10 o'clock. And then you torque the oil pressure sender down to, it's like 9 to 13 foot-pounds. You'll want to hold the T, otherwise it will keep spinning. And then I have already installed, where are we? There we go. I've already installed the 4AN adapter. So again, a little thread paste on there. Make sure you avoid the front couple threads. And then just put it in hand tight. And then they say 1 to 1.5 turns. I went until it was snug because it felt a little too loose at that point. And then the oil pressure sender plug right there, you will want to, it's taped into this main harness here. So I took a really long box cutter and I just kind of scored the tape enough so that if I pulled on the cable, it would pull through the tape. And that was enough to get it to plug in. You may or may not have to do that. We could have gotten around it, but it would have made the wire really tight, and then, 100 miles down the road it would fail. So this is all set. We're gonna feed the coolant or the turbo oil feed line down in here, and I'll show you what we're doing with that. So this is the oil feed line. It's a 4AN on both sides piece. And what we're gonna do per the instructions is we're gonna cut a slit all the way down this. So just cut a groove. We'll wrap it around the line and then we'll put a couple zip ties on it. This is just so that it doesn't rub on anything. You don't wanna rub through this line. You don't wanna rub through another line. Use a box cutter with a really sharp blade. Just be very careful because if you slip, you can do some pretty serious damage. So we're gonna cut that off camera and then I'll show you guys how it fits. Put the rubber on before you feed it down, which makes sense because it'd be a really tight spot. This end, you get it close to the, you just really want to cover the braided section. Get it close to the swivel end, and then I just evenly space the 4 zip ties, and you can see the splice. We cut it just down the center. We will now feed this in from the top, and then go back down under the car, thread it in, tighten it up. I typically put just a touch of Loctite on here, just don't want it backing out. Blue is fine, and just make sure you put it inside the threads. You don't want it to go in your oil line. So we're gonna run this through the top, and where they show it is kind of right in line with this pivot joint on the wiper. So we're gonna just go down a little bit through here. Might take some wiggling. Really, you just want it to end up somewhere next to the transmission, and then it can be repositioned up here later. But feeding it down is much easier than feeding it up. So we will try that. We'll go up with the lift. We'll hook the line up, hopefully, and then we'll come back up and I think install a turbo manifold. Very tough to see, but the end of the turbo feed line goes into the 4AN port we put on the T on the oil filter housing. I did end up clocking this one just a tiny bit more so that it was taking less of abrupt of a corner up to the top of the engine. It is now time for your 14 millimeter Allen wrench. This literally got delivered like an hour and a half ago. There's a block here on the side. Let me grab a flashlight because I know. So this block here, it's pretty apparent, it's under cylinder 4, is the one we're gonna remove. It will make a mess. Coolant will fly out of there, so just, it's just gonna make a mess. Be ready. On a big, I don't know if you wanna hold that in some visible way. Oh boy. Oh yeah. There it comes. That'll be fun to clean up later. In bag 3F, it is the water supply. You will find another bag, and inside that you will find another bag that has this guy in it. So tiny little hole, 5/16. We're gonna put some thread seal on the end of this. Again, try to keep it away from the end of the threads. It is a 19 millimeter hex. tightening that one, it is an aluminum fitting inside of an aluminum block. The steel one was extremely tight, but with the thread sealant and all that, you just want to go snug, you know, pretty good. You don't want to just reef on it. I actually switched to a 3/8 inch with a 19 millimeter on it so that I had less leverage, and with the big wrench, I would have just stripped the threads right out of it. So it's snug. The thread sealant should seal all that up. And then we are going to install the water line, which we kind of have to make first. We're going to take this, and we want to cut 30 inches of it. So we'll just lay a tape measure out, cut 30 inches of it. We're going to cut 30 inches of this, and then we will install this to that fitting in a minute. Got the line made with the heat sleeve on it. You can't push the one into the other. You kind of need to, as he called it, inchworm it. So you bunch it up, and then you pull it, and then you bunch it up and you pull it, and it will work its way all the way through. I'm leaving a little exposed down here for now because we're going to put a clamp on it. You don't want to put the clamp over the heat sleeve. It won't supply the same clamping force. And then this is what's going to go into the fitting that we just put in the block. So I've got the fitting tight, and you can always do a sanity pull test to make sure that it cannot come off. Your cooling system is going to see like 1.3 bar of pressure max. So that's like 14, 15 pounds, which I'm putting more on. It will be able to rotate, but it cannot come off. And then we'll bunch as much of the heat sleeve up as we can. And then we're going to take this with one of the orange P-clamps, and we're going to mount it onto the firewall there. So supplied P-clamp, hooks over the line. And then you can reuse the nut that was on here, or if you have a stash of hardware, you can grab an M6 nut. And the engine is going to rock as it, as you apply torque. So don't make that line super tight. You want some give so that as the engine moves, the engine moves, you have left to right wiggle. So we'll probably end up pushing a little bit down and then tightening that clamp. Once you've got it secured, it's got room to move around. We're going to take the extra and we're just going to route it underneath the brake lines for the time being. And now we get to move on to the part that we're all here for, which is installing the turbo manifold and making this thing look like it's boosted. So the next step, we're going to be installing the 4 turbo studs into the turbo side of the manifold. So they tell you to double nut, which would be threading 2 nuts on as such, locking them together, and then tightening the top one, and because they're locked together, it will tighten the bolt. I have a preferred tool that comes in handy more often than not. This is a metric stud installer or remover. It comes with a kit. It's like 6, 8, 10, 12 something, and this just slips on, has cams in it that you can tighten it with. So same end process, but that's just, you'll see me using that instead of the double nut. And then I'm also going to use some Vibratite, which is like 2000 degree Fahrenheit Loctite. Just drop on the end. Just going to thread them in by hand first. You don't have to use the Vibratite. It's just nice secondary insurance. Or sorry, this is called Hot Lock by Vibratite, but same stuff. And then the torque spec on these is 16 foot-pounds. We're gonna call that good. Imagine you heard a click on the last 2 there. You can feel it when it feels like it's not right, so figured we'd stop before we cause problems. So those are all in, they're all at the same depth. They are definitely tight, and the Vibratite will keep them in place. So that is done, that is done. You're gonna wanna get your new exhaust manifold gasket out of the kit, somewhere over here. This is your exhaust manifold gasket. It has that Interesting little header shield on it, or heat shield. This we will slide over the stock studs once we clean off that mating surface, and then we will slide our turbo manifold on. This step is optional, but I love this stuff, so. So we're gonna take this just slides on over the stock studs, usually. There we go. Just like that. And then we will take our turbo manifold, slide it on over top. Just like that. And then you're gonna reuse your stock hardware to bolt those down so the nuts are in his trunk. I'll put some Vibrotite on that, same idea. And then we will torque them down to, I believe it's 32 foot-pounds. Turbo manifold is torqued. There's 7 bolts that hold it to the block. There's 4 on the bottom. I found the easiest way to tighten the bottom ones is to actually go from underneath. There's a ton of room down there. The front one is pretty tricky to do on the bottom, so those are all good to go. The next thing we're gonna do is move on over to the turbo and prep that. So the bolts for the turbine outlet are actually on the outlet pipe itself. And then same idea, 16 foot-pounds, double nut it. I'm gonna use Vibrotite. And what I didn't cover on the last one is the short end goes into the turbo manifold on that side, and the short end goes into the turbo on this side. So, well, sorry. Short end goes into the turbo here, so they will sit like this. So we will we'll do some YouTube magic. We'll cut to it being installed, and then we will move on to the oil fittings. So we have the studs installed. So we have the studs installed in the back of the turbo, all torqued to 16 foot-pounds, exactly like the manifold. Next up, we're going to do the turbo feed fitting. So there's an inverted flare on the inside. They call out putting a drop of oil on it. I'm gonna use assembly lube because it is as good, if not better. And that is just so that when it mates the flare in the turbo, it doesn't gum up and gall. So it gives it a nice little surface to ride on. And I'm willing to bet money that this is a 9/16 to tighten that. No cuts. Man, he's good. This does not have a torque spec, just snug it up. It seals on the flare, kind of like a, well, it is an AN fitting, but like an AN fitting does. That's good. And then we're gonna flip it over. Well, we're gonna cross that off our list. We're going to flip it over, and then we're going to work on the oil drain. So next up, we're going to take the oil drain that's pre-bent, the gasket that will go right here, and then you'll need the 2 nuts that will hold this whole thing together. The way that this installs, which I'm gonna look at the instructions while I tell you, if you orient it the same way, it will kick forward like this. So it comes up and immediately towards the mount, and then back up and around. So instructions make it pretty clear. You could install it backwards on accident, so just don't do that because it will point into the engine block. I'm gonna spray this with our favorite spray tack sealant. I put that shit on everything. so Corey can see. And again, I'm going to use some Vibratite on the hardware. So I made the mistake. There are short screws and long screws, and they are different thread pitch. These will go in pretty far by hand, and then they seize up. They are for this bracket, and then these screws are in the bag that the turbo drain line is in. I should have paid attention to that a little bit. But again, a little Vibratite. You can always check by threading it in by hand before you get to this stage. And these get torqued to 24 foot-pounds. And they should be also a 1/2 inch. This one's gonna be tough to put a torque wrench on, and by tough I mean we're not gonna put a torque wrench on it. So easiest way to do that is get a feeling of what 24 foot-pounds feels like on the first one, and then do the same on the second. Feels like a lot. This worked definitely tight, but you have enough room to do like the tighten it, tighten it more, flip it back. So those are tight. I'll recheck the first one actually now just to be sure. Yep. So that is good, which means we can check another item off our list. And then the next thing we're gonna do is install the wastegate bracket. So you can see there are 2 missing bolts back here on the back of the compressor housing. And this bracket is going to mount like that.
What bolts are you going to use for that one?
We're going to use the bolts that don't fit in the oil drain and that are actually in the bag that this comes in. Shocker. It's best to leave it a little loose so that you can play with back and forth clocking. Just a touch, make sure everything lines up well. So I can still slide this left to right, which once we put the turbo wastegate on, we'll want to make sure that this has a good angle of attack here. So now we're going to install this. It comes with 2 nuts on the back. Just take them off. The orientation of this does not matter. It can either point away or towards the compressor housing. The instructions tell you both will work. We're going to mount it the way that we're going to mount it because I don't want this showing. So slide this in here. If this fitting is in the like a wrong spot, you can grab it and twist it and it will rotate and until it gets into like a comfortable position. Take your wastegate actuator rod that came in the bag and then you thread it on, and you want about 2 millimeters of preload. So the way we're going to measure that is probably come over here a little bit. We'll fully close the wastegate and see how right now, if you look from the top, Corey, all the way straight down if you can. There's not a lot of gap between this circle and the pin. So what we're going to do is just tighten it a little more. That's maybe a little better, and we'll go one more click. So that is about, we'll call it 2 millimeters of offset. Tighten all this down, use the jam nut to hold that in place, and then we'll tighten the bolts into here, and then you pull the diaphragm and slip it over this pin, and then put the C-clip back on. And the reason you want to do that is if you don't put any preload in it, the wastegate will want to open on its own with any exhaust pressure. If you put too much preload in it, you will get overboost because the wastegate cannot open. So in Corey's case, I'm going to weld it shut so that we make all the horsepower once. But preload is important. It's easy to adjust if you don't have enough later. You just undo this, give it a twist either direction. But 2 millimeters is a good rule of thumb. I believe it calls it out in the instructions as well. Yeah, about 2 millimeters short of lining up with the wastegate arm. So put the bolts on there. You can use some Vibratite again. And these bolts are still loose, which we will tighten once we get this into the final position that we want. We'll want to pull that clip off of there, which if you take a small pick, there's a tiny little slot in the back here. Just put it in and pivot, and then make sure you keep your finger there so it doesn't fly off. So now we will pull some preload, keep that shut, and then you put the circlip on the floor. Put the circlip back on. You might need pliers. It's your bitch. We will now tighten this. Also, you want, this is probably a good top-down angle. You want the rod as straight as possible and in the center of this hole here. So if the actuator is tucked to one side or like looks like it's going to rub on the side of the housing like that, move this actuator back over until you are in the middle, and then we'll tighten it there. So in our case, it's kicked all the way to the left. What we're going to do next, a lot of you have DM'd me about, because we are not touching anything that's super hot like the exhaust manifold or anything like that, we're going to start paint marking things that we have tightened. This way when we look at it later, we know it's tight. So just things like this, just a little groove. You can get these paint markers on Amazon. Like we tighten these here, tighten these, and I'm going to go ahead and check the other 4 to make sure that they aren't loose for clocking, because when these turbos show up at Flyin Miata, they get sent out to get modified. They put this elbow on for you, and while I trust Flyin Miata very much, it's always good to sanity check. You don't want to find that your bolts are loose or anything like that. So grab your half, just go around, give everything a nice snug check. And just like we expected, they tightened everything correctly. Up next, we're going to do the water fittings. So these side ports on the turbo are one is your water feed and one is your water return. Doesn't matter normally, but this will tell us where to put what fittings. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is do the inboard coolant hose or water line. So oriented this way, compressor housing on the front, turbine on the back. You should be on the one that will face the engine side. You're going to take the banjo bolt, a crush washer, this coolant fitting, and I'll go over orientation in a second, and another crush washer, and in our case, some Vibratite. Brother. And then the way you want this to fit is you want the hose to point backwards and away from the compressor. So there's only one way this will work. We're just going to thread it in by hand. And then as far as positioning goes, because this could be, any which way, the best way to do it is to just line it up with a stud, and you want it to be parallel to a stud. Just like me right now. So again, doesn't have to be perfect. Tighten that down. No torque spec on this, surprisingly, but it's a crush washer, so it's like an oil pan fitting. You just want to make sure you get some crush on it, and that you can't move anything by hand by the time you're done. That's 17 or 19? What do we think? Wrong. It's a 19 millimeter wrench. And then you'll want to hold this line because it will want to rotate. The whole turbo will want to rotate. There we go. So I'll hold it up for you. That is tight and then in line with the studs pointing straight to the back of the compressor housing. Hit it with a paint marker. That is tight. And then I got to read the next step. So there's two lines that we have to move in the engine bay before we get to the fun part of putting the turbo in. The first one is this AC line, and the second one is this brake line right here that you can see is very close to the turbo manifold itself. So this one is easy. Gently grab it and just pull. And it's like just a super thin aluminum. It'll bend right out of the way. The brake line, we were going to see if we can bend it forward like this. You want to make sure it's not rubbing on the chassis because you don't want to rub a brake line through, but you also don't want to boil your brake line fluid or your brake fluid because it's too close to that. So it's tough to get leverage on it. Let's see if we can do it by hand. And if not, we're just gonna get a crowbar and do some very light pressure on it just to make sure we are safe. And we might be able to bend it down also. So now there's a good, fat finger of space in between there. And then if we really want later, we can wrap this in some like gold reflective stuff just to keep all the extra heat off of it. It's not part of the instructions, but it doesn't hurt. So now it should reflect some of the heat back. Not a perfect solution, but Flyin Miata has put probably 100,000 miles, tens of thousands of miles on this kit, and having an air gap has been plenty. So, a little added safety factor, never hurt anybody.
And it's gold.
And it's gold. So now we get to install the turbo. So the oil drain line needs to snake in between the alternator and the turbo manifold, so it's a bit of a squeeze. They say to try to tip it forward and then roll it back. And then we're going to use Nordlock washers that they supply and the nuts, and we're going to torque these down to 16 foot-pounds. These are the Nordlock washers. There are 2 per set, and they go with there's like a multi-corrugated side there and then like a less corrugated side there. The larger corrugated surfaces go together, and then the super corrugated surface goes on the outside. So this goes first, and then you take one of the silver lock nuts that they give you, and we will slip that over the top. I'll try to at least. So after a fight to get all of these tightened, this one you can put a socket on. That one on the inside, if you take a 1/4-inch socket, like a shorty socket, you can get enough angle on it to bite, make sure it's a 6-point. The 2 in the rear, you have to do with a wrench. And if you look at this one, I've modified it. This is from another turbo install years ago. And this lets you get enough turns on there. Not a super enjoyable process, but it is tight. And we are going to move on to the water outlet fitting. So the other water fitting. So this is how it comes. It's in a little baggie. Take a crush washer. We're going to sneak it under the wastegate line. And then thread it on in there. And then it's a 19 millimeter. I'm gonna pull this one brake line out of my way. Take a 19. There we go. And same idea as the other side. You just want to tighten it to crush the washer. And then you are done. So next you're going to take this 90-degree fitting, and again it's a flare seat, so put a drop of oil on the flare, and that goes on top of the turbo. And I'm not certain on orientation at this point. We're going to be using P-clamps to hold this line in place later. So for now, just take this and we're gonna loosely thread it onto the top. Everything is still movable because we haven't tightened the lower fitting and we haven't tightened this. So depending on where this line ends up, we will snug it up. I believe, and I haven't looked this far in the instructions, we will position it once the turbo blanket is on, and we'll probably put it over the turbo blanket a little bit. But that is all that step calls for, just loosely fit it, and we're gonna move on. So apparently I got ahead of myself earlier. We're going to reposition this now that it's on the car. So we're just gonna loosen the 2 1/2-inch bolts that we tightened earlier. Totally ruined my paint marker. And then what they call out is moving it down as far as you can, but you still want 10 millimeters or 3/8 of an inch between the closest brake line and the closest fitting. So I mean, this all the way down still has 10 millimeters. So there's plenty of clearance. We'll just tighten it there. The reason you want to do that is because if the engine rocks, you don't want to be hitting your brake lines. We're back. Smooth shave, smooth brain. We're gonna do the oil drain. That was not supposed to rhyme, but that was, we'll call it. So in the bag, you've got looks like an 8AN to a barb fitting, some rubber hose, heat sleeve, 2 hose clamps. It's like an M10 to 8AN adapter and a crush washer. So we'll bring the car up. Crush washer is going to go in the oil drain, and then we'll build our way back up from there. So we're gonna pull the drain plug now. It shouldn't be too tight because we put it in earlier, just loosely. Preventatively. Put the garbage can underneath it. Shouldn't be a lot in there, but I lied. So I've got the fitting in here with the crush washer behind it. It's a 21 mil. We're gonna torque it to 20 foot-pounds. And then when you change your oil, you will undo the M8 from like the fitting that goes here and drain your oil out of this bung instead. You shouldn't have to remove this in the future. So we kind of bounced around a couple steps. We're gonna do the oil drain line. So this comes pre-cut. We're gonna put some heat sleeve over it and then a clamp. This is a 7 millimeter. You'll wanna probably use a wrench instead of a flathead, just it's pretty tight to get to. This will go up onto the oil drain first, and then once we put the other piece on, we will assemble the whole thing. So we're gonna go back in from where the header or the downpipe comes down, and we will slot it up in there, tighten it up, and then we'll show you guys the routing. And we wanna touch on the instructions currently call it a 45-degree fitting for the oil drain, and they include a 90. So we just got off the phone with the handsome gentleman over at Flyin Miata, and they confirmed it is supposed to be a 90, and they're gonna look into that and see if they can fix it. 90 is correct. So I'm gonna come up in front of this engine mount, and then slide it onto that hose up there, which we can show you once I get my mitts out of the way. You wanna make sure it's fully seated up to the barb on the flange, and then we'll pull this up here, and then we'll tighten this guy. You don't have to go crazy. It is a gravity drain, it's not a pressurized system. So I've slid the heat sleeving back up over the clamp so that all the rubber is covered. And then down here you'll see it's got a lot of extra. So what we're gonna do is take the 90, I've put some oil on the sealing flange inside of here, just like all the other fittings we've done. And we're going to loosely thread that on there. And then just kind of, you know, you don't want it tight. You can leave a little slack. and we know we're gonna wanna cut it right around there. So I'm gonna take these tools, which you can get at Home Depot. It is a hose cutter. It makes a nice cut. So we got the fitting on. We were not able to get the hose fully seated against this black washer here. It's over 2 barbs and you could not pull it off if you hung off of it. So it's definitely sealed. The hose clamp feels kind of just there for a secondary layer of protection. But this is good. This is tight. Again, not super tight on this. It seals on a flange surface. And then we've routed it just so that it's not, you know, touching anything. It's not going to rub through, and it goes up in front of the engine mount there. So that is a completed oil drain. And next up, we're going to put the top piece of the downpipe in it. So we're going to install the downpipe next. If you have the catted version, this process will be much faster for you. But we have the do-it-yourself version, so this is going to be a bit longer of a process. Step one, regardless, is to feed the upper downpipe, I guess, the turbo outlet onto the turbo. So if this is painted, they call it out, you'll want to tape it off unless you want to scratch the daylights out of it on the way up. So that should be good. And then we're going to go up from the bottom. And I've got if you're doing this on the floor, use a jack, but I've got I think it's like an exhaust stand. Pushing up on the transmission block of wood, make sure you don't push up on the AN fitting because you will snap it. This guy is a bit of a dance to go up. So it's gonna go up the frame rail and then rotate into position as you get to the top. Gonna be pretty hard to show you guys. The instructions called out the same thing. So we're just gonna start from back here. Okay, so it's pretty tight. I had to you just kind of fiddle with it a bunch, and eventually you'll get one of the screw or bolt holes over the frame rail, and you can kick it up and rotate it. And then once it's above the frame rail, you keep rotating it clockwise so the outlet will be facing the back of the car, and then you keep going, keep going, keep going. So you will do a 270-degree rotation to get it seated onto the back of the turbo. Now we're gonna bolt that down. We'll bring the car back down, bolt it down, and then we're gonna get to work on the cat. Just go ahead and peel the tape off before you bolt it down. And then Flyin Miata was nice enough to put some recesses in here so you can get sockets on. That's the biggest pain of any turbo kit ever. So we're gonna take the remaining 5 sets of Nordlock washers and locking nuts and slip them on. They go 16 foot-pounds each. So the next thing we're gonna do is put some anti-seize around the threads of your O2 sensor, and we're gonna go from the bottom and install it in. So this is the top one with the heat shield on it, and then the bottom one we saw yesterday does not have the heat shield on it. So we'll bring the car up. These are all torqued in, so that's good. This goes on. We'll put the flange on for the cat, and then we will cut to cutting the cat, tacking that, welding it all out, doing all of that extra work. So we're gonna cut it in the bandsaw if it will work. I'd rather do that than cut with a cutoff wheel and make a mess. So we got it fixtured in here. Gonna hang on to it just to be sure. So bandsaw cut to like here, and then this interfered. So we finished the rest with a hacksaw, which is why it's not the nicest cut. But with a MIG welder, you can fill a pretty big gap. So Wolfie's going to do that for us. Now what I'm going to do is take a, I don't know what you properly call this. I call it the finger blaster. And we're going to clean around the edge to give a nice welding surface, a nice clean surface. And then we'll go ahead and bolt this up in the car. We'll bolt the top flange on. We'll MIG it into place, a couple like 3-4 tacks, pull the whole thing, weld it out on the bench, and then this will be done. So I've cleaned off a bunch. Being that it's a MIG welder, it doesn't have to be perfectly clean like TIG. This is what it will get welded to. So it doesn't really matter how flat the cut is or anything like that. When we put this in the car, we'll throw a couple tacks around because we're really not gonna be able to show you that very well. Throw a couple tacks around it, remove this whole assembly, and then go on the bench and just run a full bead around it. And this becomes your new cat section. And then we modify the heat shield to bolt all that together. So the next step, we're gonna put this up. This goes onto the downpipe, and then you'll clamp this up to the downpipe and put some anti-seize on these threads. I really don't like these style of nuts because they are very easy to cross thread or just like gall up the threads. So if you put some anti-seize on there, and I tend to try to work them in by hand instead of just put an impact on it and blast it. It builds a lot of heat, you get metal galling, and then you'll never get it out. So I'm gonna hang this up there, and then we will get to using the cat support bracket to put the cat in the proper position. And we'll call our friend Wolfie, who's working on his track car over there, to throw some tack welds on it. So we're going to test fit or place our cat right now. So hopefully you have 2 studs here, not just one. You will mount this up, and you'll want to line your nut back up with this, and you want to make sure that this is in the same position that it was. So a little tricky to see that one. Just if you have a borescope or if you can look through the side or whatever, because you should have a clean shot from the fender well to see into there. Line that up, and then in our case, we're gonna just have to kind of guess on this guy, but between this positioning and that positioning, and knowing that this is pretty centered to this hole, we are going to be pretty centered as well. So a little bit of test fit, trial and error. Don't rush this step because if you weld it wrong, it's just going to be wrong for the rest of the time. So probably got to put the unit together in one shot. Or at least get the cat. So as much as I can TIG, I have only MIG'd like once in my life, and Wolfie set the machine up for me. So he's conveniently here. I don't want to mess up Corey's car. So he's gonna MIG this. We're gonna put a couple tacks. We did some test hits on the old piece with my $130 or whatever Amazon Prime MIG welder. Okay, while we let the cat cool off, pretending we didn't just go to dinner for an hour, we are going to modify the heat shield so that it bolts up and doesn't interfere with the cat like V-band. So put the two halves together, and kind of where this edge rolls over, we're going to draw a line and just continue it all the way around. Ignore my upper line there. You can take too little off. You can't really take too much off. Just don't cut any of the like screw holes out of it. And you can do this with a cutoff wheel. I'm going to try to do it with my little bandsaw. Try to make less of a mess. Eye protection, ear protection. Safety squints don't work. Okay, reinstall the heat shield. If you're unsure of the orientation, the O2 sensor hole should be a pretty clear indication of where it needs to go. Don't look too closely at those welds, but you can see we left room for the V-band clamp and then a little extra headroom there. But this should be ready to go in. I believe we have to take this bracket off, but let me look at the instructions first. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself just so that this is ready to go, but we are assembling the cat support bracket. So there's this black plate and then these rubber bushings. The bushings slip over both sides and you just kind of push it in, work it around, take it around town. And then just make sure it's fully seated. You don't have any caught edges. These little bushings or spacers or whatever go inside, just like that. And then I gotta see what's left. So we're gonna install the cat now loosely. So put the V-band on, but make it so you can still rotate the cat around. My suggestion for orientation is you want the clamp to be kind of this way. So if here's the O2 sensor, you kind of want it parallel-ish to the O2 sensor, if that makes sense, so that you can access it through the passenger side wheel well, which you're gonna wanna do later once this is all assembled because you can actually tighten it, so. Can you just hold that there? So the V-band is snug, so this can't come off, but we can still rotate it around its own axis, which is important. So now we're gonna put the brace that we just assembled, which I'll show you because we didn't show it. This is the brace, and I'm getting ahead because we gotta put the O2 sensor in, but this is the configuration. So it's the 90, and then you want to come forward with the slots for the cat mounts are right there. We're gonna put the O2 sensor in first, which is the same as the other one, just a little bit of thread anti-seize on the threads, and then send her in, plug it in. So I wanna touch on the fact that I forgot to install this little guy. Make sure you put that back on, and then just run your O2 sensor through it, and then plug in the O2 sensor. So both O2 sensors should be plugged in and tight at this point in your turbo swap.
Yeah,
Working for
you're
free.
content.
I'm not getting paid for this.
Yeah.
Wait till this
until your
video takes
content.
off. Yeah.
I'm telling you, the first, your labor, all yours. The next, call me 50%.
Okay. Yeah. Get your cut. So we're gonna put the mid pipe back on. The cat is still rotatable. Don't forget your donut gasket. It doesn't call it out in the instructions. So just slips on over.
And what would happen if you didn't put that on?
It would leak.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we can take it off if you want.
No, I'm good.
All right. So now the mid pipe will go up. Make sure you have your springs for this side, and then you'll put the nuts on the top. Thank you. So mid-pipe is tight, V-band is tight. We're gonna put the cat support bracket on. I'm gonna loosely put this one in, and then I'm going to tighten the two that go into the cat so that this can get lifted up to a position that it wants to sit in. And then I'll tighten this to the block, kind of like iterative. These are slotted, this is slotted. So just kind of work your way up. You don't wanna have this like away from the block and then try to tighten it. So just make sure everything is snug up. And then my suggestion is tighten here and then tighten into the block. All right, cat support brace is tight. Ignore my random bolt here. That's just what we ended up doing, but it worked out pretty well, I'm not gonna lie. So this is all supported. Underside of the car is ready for bracing, and then it will be done. So I'm starting with the middle brace, but remember you got the slots over there, so we can just slide it in. Run the bolts up, and I believe per the instructions, the torque spec is 17 to 22 foot-pounds. Or in our case, a couple clicks of the Milwaukee stubby. All the braces are on, and I misspoke. The rears get 13 to 19 foot-pounds, and these get the higher value from earlier. So I just run them in with an impact, a little stubby impact every time. I don't think I've ever torqued a brace down in my life. So up next, we're gonna go back to the water lines. We should be mostly done underneath the car. Could be wrong, but we're gonna go to the water lines, and on the first one is easy. So the water line we ran earlier that we P-clamped to the firewall that has all this extra slack, that is gonna go through here. And then we are going to fit that onto that barb. You could cut it shorter if you wanted to. This gives it a nice radius and it keeps it very far away from this. I've dealt with melted lines on other cars, and the farther away you can keep it, the better. So tighten that one up, and then we're gonna move to this guy over here. Coverage. So we're gonna take the 5/16 water line that we cut to make the other water line. We're gonna cut what's left of it to 52 inches. And then we're gonna take the remaining heat hose, or whatever you'd call this. We're gonna cut 20 inches of that. So right around there. So this says leave a few inches exposed on one end, and then we're going to use a supplied spring clamp, which would be this guy. That seems to have sprung clamp a bolt. There you go. Pliers. So pre-install this. Come on. About 1.5 inches up the hose. That way we're gonna feed this behind the head, and then you wanna be able to just pinch it and slide it down over the barb. So the steam port, it's gonna be really hard to show, but you removed the steam port line earlier. It is, if you follow the main valley of the valve cover back, it is going to be right there. And it's a silver 5/16 port. I don't know if that shows up on camera, but it is right in line. We'll take a pair of long needle nose. It's very important to make sure that the spring clamp is all the way on, because when you put the cowell back on and all this stuff, you're not going to be able to access that. So make sure it's fully seated. I've got maybe a 1/8 inch of hose sticking out below the clamp, and it's fully seated, so that way the hose can't, wiggle its way off. This we're going to run temporarily just over along with the other one. Just out of the way, you finalize the routing of this one a little bit later. So the next step, you're gonna see we've removed the coil pack harness. That's because we just did a valve cover gasket on his car while we were here. That's irrelevant to what we're trying to do now. So we're gonna take these P-clamps, there's 2 of them. The bigger one is, we're gonna actually have to undo one of his valve cover bolts, which we knew. Just going to secure. So this will bolt to the rear valve cover bolt. Torque spec on those is 70 to 92 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds. And they're gonna take the little guy, and that's gonna hold the oil line back here to this bolt. So we've got the lines hooked up. I wasn't able to get the rear turbo, or the turbo line into the water line fitting, so we're gonna just end up zip tying it to it. The clamp just felt a little bit too small. So like it's a 1/2 inch clamp. If you went up to a 9/16 clamp and then a 3/8 clamp for the front water line, I think it'd be a little more comfortable, but it will work this way. We'll just secure this back here and that way it doesn't rub through anything. But now that we've got this fitted, I've got the turbo line coming 90, and it might look aggressive, but it's a pretty gradual curve down to the P-clamp. We're gonna tighten this. It's a 9/16. First we gotta tighten to the turbo itself. And then here, if you take a 7/16, you can hold this fitting. And that is all tight. So we're on to the heater core system. We're gonna try to finish all of the cooling lines and like plumbing tonight. So this is the new heater core line, and this is some pre-cut heat sleeve. It's tight fit. It is pretty much the same size. The easiest end to route it in from is this end because it's less, sharp than that. And we are just trying to get it kind of to sit there. So we're gonna be doing some worming or whatever you wanna call that. Oh, maybe, come on. Same process works, so. And then we're gonna take the spring clamps that are in this little baggie, and we're gonna install them both ends, same idea, about 1.5 inches up the piece. The pliers are missing over here. Let me look at how this is gonna, okay, so this is gonna go in the car this way. So orient your spring clamp in a way that you'll be able to get to it later. So for this side, we'll do the spring clamp up. Like that, so that when it's in here, we can grab it and slide it forward. And then the back there, let's take a look, shall we? We're gonna want it on this side. So you have the most access over here. Like I was saying. Oh, hang on, I don't have the right PPE on. Up about 1.5 inches, and then we will put this in the car. So it routes in front of this water line. which is why we heat sleeved it. I'm gonna see if I can pull the heat sleeve a little bit farther over, just so that this is a little more covered. And then it goes over the back on top of the valve cover. If you have a stock valve cover, there is a notch here that it will kind of lay into. And then it goes straight down to the plug that we removed earlier. When I was putting the spring clamp in it, it felt like it was bottoming out, but it was actually getting stuck on like what I'm assuming is like a recirculation for evap or something. I ended up taking the clamp and rotating it around and it popped through. So stick your hand down there, make sure it is fully seated and you have like only 1/8 of an inch of rubber on the other side. Or again, same as this, you'll end up in a world of hurt when that starts leaking. So let's see if we can shimmy this over. There we go. And then we're going to take the P-clamp that they give you, which is this 1-inch P-clamp, and that will go over the back here, and it will go onto the cam angle sensor slot right there. There you go, that just keeps it from rubbing on things. And we're good. So we're gonna take the rest of the 5/16 hose that we've been using for all the water lines, slip the remaining 10 inches of heat shielding over the top, leave a little bit on the edge, and then this goes into the turbo. So we will slide that onto there. I'm just going to leave enough exposed to tighten the clamp with, because this is a very hot part of the, probably the hottest part of the engine now. Passes the pull test. And then this part in the instructions had me a little confused. We're going to run this all the way around the back of the engine. And then we're gonna tuck it a little bit, just for cleanliness sakes. You can kind of do whatever you want here, but I'm gonna run it underneath. We're gonna get it coming under the throttle body. Actually, probably maybe inside of the fuel and evap if we can. Just try to avoid anything sharp like that. Hose clamp is gonna not be ideal. So maybe we won't go this way. We'll come around the outside. There's a hose clamp right here that you want to make sure you avoid. Otherwise it will rub through. And then that is going to come up front here on the radiator. So there's a steam port here that we're going to pop off, just a spring clip. This will go into there, and then we're going to cut it, which will make sense in a minute. Put a spring clip or a hose clamp on there. So that's the basic concept. We're going to tighten this spring clip or hose clamp down. The only way I was able to get this on was to put the spring clamp all the way loose on the hose and then push the assembly into the pin. I couldn't slide it over once it was already on the hose. So now we're going to want to find a place where this kind of fits naturally, because we have to remember there's going to be an intercooler pipe that's going to come right here. So I'm going to look at the instructions and see what the best way is. I feel like cutting it straight would be best, but let's see. So we missed a step, kind of because it's not in the instructions, but watching the video, they go over it. This line, which is the which runs from the steam port on the back of the head, we are going to return to the coolant reservoir. So they ran it underneath this water line, and then in through the ABS system. There's a ton of ways to do this, just you don't want it rubbing on anything. So we're gonna go this way, and then the airbox cover has a spot for a P-clamp, and then this from the factory, so we're gonna duplicate that, runs down, and I'm gonna use a spring clamp so that it's symmetrical, and then this will go into here. So leave a dip in it, it's intentional, and then the filter has somewhere to go as well. So that's clamped in. I'm going to zip tie this just to the brake line here, and then that'll be a wrap for the water lines and the oil lines. So the cooling system is finished. This we've left a little loose for the time being because when we pull the injectors out, we'll want to be able to move this out of the way. So we will zip tie that later, but for now, we will pick you up tomorrow when we start with power steering and intercooler stuff. So the car will start to look fast tomorrow. So we're gonna do a power steering relocation now. If you watch the videos, they do this after the intercooler piping, but in the instructions it's before. So we're gonna do it now while there's just nothing in here, and then I'm gonna take the camera. So I've marked where we need to cut, just right here on the next to the ECU, and then here between the two bolts that hold this to the chassis, just a little 90. And then here, so the first tall rib, cut all the way down, follow the contour, and then for 2 ribs, and then come straight across. We are gonna try to cut this in the car. There are wires back there, so just be a little careful. I'm gonna use a body saw, and then probably a cutoff wheel for those. That smells even worse. So we're going to remove one bolt from the ECU mount. It's this one that's buried deep in between the actual ECU. Just a 10 millimeter, we won't need it. So this bolts back into the 2 factory spots. You can use the factory screws. We don't have them anymore, so we put new ones in. Make sure that this screw hole lines up. You can put a bolt in it as a guide while you tighten it, but then what we're gonna end up doing is there's a hole over here, and there's a pivot pin on this side of the power steering cooler. So we'll put the pin in. Oh, it is a tight squeeze. We're gonna actually modify, we're gonna take a little bit off the edge here so that this clears everything in there a little bit better. So I'm gonna actually take off a little more right here because the hose is rubbing against it. So I'm just gonna probably go up another rib and come up here, and that should be enough to get us clearance. So we'll just pop that one bolt out.
You price match 2.5 slot?
So we're gonna pivot this now because this has some tension under it. So we'll just loosen the clamp. See if we can break it free. And then just rotate it. It kind of wants to sit a little bit more this way. And that way it's less under tension. And back down we go. And if you're any bit OCD. Make sure you line up the dirt marks. So we now have to move this power steering line. It's just in this metal clamp here, you just pull down. We're gonna take a P-clamp and we're gonna secure it to this ground screw. And before we remove the ground strap, we're gonna push on it to make it flat. So what this is gonna do, so we push the ground strap flat, and then what we're doing by moving this down here is making room for the intercooler pipe to come right over here, and then the battery box is gonna sit right there. So P-clamp there, it's a 10 millimeter. We're gonna use nicer hardware than that. Don't look at my wares, my stash. So they,
Stash, not stash like Ethan from Flyin Miata.
yes, Ethan's 1.6 lever stash. So we're gonna take the hose clamp, loop it as such. Don't forget the ground. I'm gonna see if I can sneak the ground behind it. There we go. So we've temporarily removed the throttle body because we're gonna replace the power steering O-ring that goes right here. So allegedly, when you move this, it loosens that enough that the O-ring fails. So they do include new O-rings. Looks like a 12 millimeter. So it's a 12 millimeter to get the bolt out, and then I just used a pick to get the O-ring off. And then it's just the little guy. I'm gonna take some of the oil that leaked out. You never wanna put these in dry. And in she goes. I'm gonna try and keep some pressure on it. Thread the bolt back in. Give her the old snug. Throttle body is just it's a rubber O-ring, so make sure that stays in there. And then it's 4 8 millimeter head bolts. So we're gonna install the intercooler bracket using 2 of the M6 bolts and then these M6 nuts, so the little flange guys. There are 4 holes, just use the bottom holes. It's a much better system than the NANB, where it just like hangs. So we've got the intercooler bracket mounted. We're going to mount the intercooler. You can mount it either way, but if you're cool, you put the logo out. This will work. This is cooler.
FM says it's like 5 to 10 horsepower.
Yeah. The FM is there so that people know it's a fast Miata. This mount is very nice. Leave the red caps on it because we're going to be drilling a hole right here and you don't want all of the debris falling into your engine. Look at that. He's so real. Also worth noting, I use my own hardware, but they do include M8 nuts, M8 bolts, and washers. I just use flange bolts instead. Same idea. Give them snug, and then paint mark them.
Why do you paint mark everything?
Did I see you use Loctite too?
I did. Loctite blue on earthing. That's not hot. So we're gonna take this cutting template now. This is included in the kit. Be careful because these aren't held on by a whole lot, but this is the pilot guide to drill the hole correctly. So step one, take out your headlight hole bolt. And then this will go right about there. Don't go crazy for now. We'll end up holding that in while we start the drill, and then just use that as a pilot guide. This is a 3/16 drill bit. We're gonna just punch a hole in the center, and then we'll follow up with the 3-inch hole saw. There is stuff on the other side of this, so when you break through, just let off. Just like that. Take that out again, and now use that pilot bit as a hole saw guide. So I've removed the 3D printed brace for now, and I've got my 3-inch hole dozer. Get it in the pilot hole. And then clean up and deburr this, and then go around with like a black paint pen or whatever color your car is, and just apply some paint to this face. Otherwise this will rust out. So we've got it all painted and cleaned up. Now we're gonna take this piece and a set of flush cuts, and you're just gonna come in on the edge here as close as you can and cut the guide out of it, which is actually a brilliant idea. And then you can clean this up a little bit. I'll probably hit it with a little finger sander, and then we will put this back on the car. So I've got it deburred. You're gonna wanna grab this piece, which is the other side. So we're gonna install this here and then feed this from the inside of the engine bay, and then this comes together and it clips it in place. What are you looking for? In the...
Oh, do you have like the big ones?
I have a bunch.
Oh, no shit.
In the Miata parts drawer. Third one on the right. Oh, a bit of a squeeze. That's pretty slick. So we'll tighten this bolt up, but I mean, that holds it very well.
It's a lot better than when I just put a 3-inch hole saw through the side of my NA.
All right, this is the hose for the turbo side. So it's got the blow-off valve port on it. We're just gonna take the hose clamp off for now. And then you wanna fold the end so it looks like this, because this is what you're gonna slip through the hole we just made in the firewall. And I think this is like 3.5 inch or 3 1/4 on the outside, so it wouldn't fit. They do recommend loosening this guy, so we're gonna just undo the 2 bolts there. Don't unhook any hoses, just remove 1, 2, 3, and this whole thing will come up and give you a little extra space. So picking that up gives you a bunch of room to at least, maneuver. And now we're gonna try this. So I think we want to go over that one under there. Kind of push, pull, twist. Corey's not even paying attention.
Excuse me, trying to get the flashlight while I was perfectly centered on the video.
Also, now we can take the rubber cap off of the intercooler. Take the huge hose clamp, put it back on, and then we're just gonna kind of twist and rotate. Get it stuck on stuff. There we go.
Proper.
Perfect fit, man. So we have the passenger side intercooler pipe on. It is secured down below, and then it routes to the lower intercooler pipe, and I've angled the clamp so that I can put an extension on an impact and get it in from there. The next thing we're gonna do is the driver's side intercooler pipe. So there's a 90-degree elbow in one of the bags, and then one side of it has this arrow on it that does not go into the throttle body. That is gonna go into our MAF tube, which we're gonna set up now, and then we'll do the rest that goes into the intercooler. So this is the MAF tube. It does have 2 screws in it with little lock washers on it. Just back those out. You're gonna take your MAF, which you would have removed from your stock airbox earlier, a pick, get underneath the O-ring. Ow, don't stab yourself. There we go. And then Flyin Miata includes a new one. Just slip it back over. And then this will only fit one way. So it does install that way. It will not fit if you put it backwards. So just press it in, take your screws, and it looks like a 4 or 3 millimeter hex head. We'll see. Of course, my 3 is not in here. There it is. So it's 3 millimeter wrench. These are little screws in aluminum, so don't go super crazy, but good hand tight. And then there are little lines on top, on both ends, that will line up with this arrow here. So arrow lines up with the groove. And then we're gonna put the last piece on that's gonna run through to this side of the intercooler pipe. So we're gonna take the hose that goes into the intercooler. It's a separate piece. Again, it has the arrow, so this is what's gonna go on the engine bay side, and this is the intercooler end. We've pre-installed this, so you want the logo facing into the engine bay as such, because it doesn't fit over this. So what we're gonna do is give her the old loop-de-loop-de. And then once it's through, you take the mating piece, slide it over. Bit of a tight fit. Don't forget your hose clamps. I have all of these hose clamps loose as well so that we can pivot this as need be. There you go. So that one's point down a little bit. And then install these same way as you did the other ones. So get it all the way through. Take your mating clamp. There you go. Just work your way around, make sure it's fully clipped. And then you can go and tighten every hose clamp. So there should be 4 on this side. And plug in your MAF. If for some reason your MAF is not up, you've done something very wrong. But all of these lines should point to each other. Everything should be lined up. And just tighten them up. So, kind of touched on it. If you install this pipe the other way, so your MAF is here with the harness pointing that way, these care about the direction of airflow. So if it does not look like this, it is wrong. You should be reading Flyin Miata from the front of the car. If it's reading that way, you've got it flipped around and just set it up correctly. All of them are tight. Make sure you've got no like king toes in here or anything like that. Sick. I think next, maybe airbox. So one of the things you're not going to see us do is reinstall this air dam piece that goes here. We don't have it because when we put the intake in there, we got rid of it. But what you'll do is trim it around these, leave a gap so that nothing rubs. And then you'll have to remove your headlights again to reinstall that piece, put your headlights back in, and you'll be good to go. The instructions cover it, the video covers it. We are going to move on to the battery box, which is a beautiful piece. I might say so myself. We're going to install this guy first. You can reuse the hardware that you took out. I'm going to use new stuff. It just slips in from the top, and then just wiggle it around until you find the bolt holes again. You'll see I've removed this hose from the compressor outlet for the time being. There's another screw down in here that we need to install in the battery box. And over here. Amateurs. Now the battery box is in, we can hook the compressor hose up again. You want to go under this electrical harness. It takes a little finagling. And then the clamp is already on there. That should position perfectly onto there, and you can see it kind of dodges the battery box. And then to tighten this guy, so clip the battery cable into the battery box. There's a hole right here for it. If your clip is broken, run a zip tie, otherwise this will fall into your accessory belt and you'll be in a world of hurt. Napp legend. This is the top of your battery mount. And then we're going to use the original J-hooks and nuts to hold that in place. Put the J-hooks through it, and obviously they're loose. We'll go in and hook them to the battery box. Battery's in. We're gonna leave it unhooked for the time being just because we don't want anything keying on. We're gonna be doing fuel stuff, all sorts of things like that. So just make it secure. We'll probably tighten that a little bit more. And then we are gonna move on to the airbox. So the airbox I've already done some prep to. You're gonna take the small vacuum line that they have, it's pre-cut, trim guard, and then place it. So I put some here, 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 here. That's one piece. There's some there, there, and there. That's just to stop it from rattling against the chassis. This stuff doesn't like to stick, so what I did is I ran like a bead of super glue on the top, and then I put the vacuum hose on it so it doesn't fall off. It's notorious for that. And then you're gonna cut about 7 inches or 180 millimeters of this thicker stuff, and that just loops around where the air filter is gonna go through. So this, loosen this bolt that holds the AC bracket on. This will slide in. It's a snug fit. And it should catch that bolt. There we go. And then I've taken the clip out that was back here that held like the washer hose line on. And we're gonna end up using that to mount the airbox. And then all sorts of things like this hose right here will clip into the airbox very much like OEM. So very nice piece. We'll tighten this guy down. So this bolt hole right here, there's an aluminum spacer that goes in between the factory metal and the airbox that just keeps it from getting crushed. And then this one is tight, so the airbox, the bottom piece of the airbox is fitted. So we've got the, this is clipped on, and then the AC hose gets clipped on with a P-clamp to the bolt that's right below, or the nut in the heat shield. And then I've pushed it down so that it's below the seal over here, because we're gonna be running the intake into this box. So next up, we're gonna put the compressor inlet hose on. So there's 2 hose clamps and this spacer tube that are together. One of those hose clamps is for the compressor, one of them goes here, and then the filter will go on the other side of that. I've taken the TurboSmart Compact. This is the orientation you want it to go. So we have the side port goes into the compressor inlet, and the bottom port goes into the charge pipe. This clamp is loose, these are all loose. And we're going to tuck it in. They do say that this goes over the hose. Bit of a dance. Come on. There we go. Make sure nothing's pinched. You'll want to push that into the charge pipe. And again, we're going to go ahead and leave all the clamps loose for the time being. This piece will go into the end here. And then we're going to take the filter, which is funny enough the same one as the NA and NB. Man, that is a tight fit. That is, that is a fit. Okay, now we should be ready to install the airbox. This is very, very, very tight fitting. Just, take some wiggling. And the airbox lid goes on, and it gets secured with 3 M6 screws. We're gonna do this a little different on Corey's car again. We don't have the stock PCV, which would be somewhere up here. You would cut this to length, slip it over the quick disconnect fitting, and plug that in, and you would be done. We're gonna have to do something a little bit custom because we're gonna run his catch can. So we'll probably end up doing some weird routing. We'll cut this short, do a fitting. We'll do that off camera, but this should be very easy if you have a stock valve cover. So the next step, you're gonna need the vacuum bag. It's got 2 fittings, the bigger T fitting, and then the T fitting where they're all the same size, 2 spring clamps, and a boatload of vacuum hose. What we're gonna do is cut the vacuum line off the brake booster. There is a check valve in here, so make sure you stay on the manifold side of the check valve. So this one is pretty stiff. They tend to get, they've like vulcanized over time. If you're not sure, you can kind of run your hand over this and you'll feel a bump. So his check valve is right around here. Make sure you cut over here. We'll put the bigger T in there, and then you will run a vacuum hose over to that side. So we're gonna cut this probably right where the rubber ends, this like secondary sleeve, and we'll put this T in there. I haven't done this in a long time. Smash the car. So I've put the T in here. I ended up taking the rubber sleeve off, which is why this looks a little funky. But T is in there, and then I've run the vacuum line underneath all this stuff, loosely zip tied it. You don't want to pinch the hose. Twice there, and then it's just sitting over there for now, because what we're gonna do is take a clamp, put the T on there, and then one end of this will run to the wastegate, and the other end of this will run to here. So I'm gonna tuck this underneath and then run the lines a little more discreetly, I guess, because this can rotate. So we will we'll hide it however it best fits. So the T is hiding, which makes it a little cleaner. And then I ran to the turbo compact line up from the bottom. And that's it for vacuum lines. Next thing is gonna be the map sensor. So we'll have to upgrade to a 2.5 bar map sensor to account for the extra boost. And that'll be on the back of the intake manifold. So next thing we have to undo is the map sensor. It is in quite possibly the worst spot. So no way we'd get a camera back there to show you. The pictures show where it is, but if you look kind of through here, you'll see this plug just chilling like way down in there. And then the map sensor sits like this into the back of the intake manifold, pretty much right here. And it is held in by 1 T25 Torx. And the only way I was able to get a wrench on it was I took the T25 with a short extension, put it in there, clipped it on like by hand, chased down with the wrench, clipped the wrench on, and it wasn't very tight. It was like, almost felt hand tight. Broke it free, put the other extension on, and then moved the whole thing out by hand. So this comes out, and we're gonna put a new one in. So this is probably only, they're notoriously like 1.3 bar, which is like 3 or 4 PSI boost. So it wouldn't be enough to read, in our case, 8 pounds or 11 if you're running an NC2 or 3. So Flyin Miata sends this one, which also comes with this bracket. We're not gonna use this bolt hole. This bracket just slips over, clips into place, and then you're gonna put the Torx bit back into here and mount it in the same orientation as the old one. I'd recommend some assembly lube or oil on this O-ring because you're gonna wanna pop it into place. Oh yeah, look at that. So you can pre-thread it. Now it doesn't fall out. So it is a captive screw. And again, going to lubricate that a little bit. And we'll see. Come back to me in 20 minutes when I've got it installed. I think it has actually been 20 minutes. It is in. It doesn't really get tight. It's like a self-tapping screw into a plastic housing, so don't, once it snugs up a little bit on the 1/4-inch wrench that you're probably gonna use, go in there. The best way to describe it, the bracket that you clipped on looks like this. And the screw goes in this way. You can move it this way because the bracket will flex. You should not be able to grab the sensor and move it out. The O-ring will take up any movement this way, it'll be fine. The sensor is just snug. There's one set screw and that's it, or one screw and that's it. I ended up using this magnet, putting it in the back here, checking for orientation. The easiest way to know if you're in the wrong angle from out here, which we can't show on the camera, if the sensor looks like the plug end is perfectly up and down, you need to clock it down. So you want it's probably like 15 or 20 degrees of an angle on it. If you have a mirror and the instructions, the color ones probably show it better, but there is a coolant nipple right here or an evap nipple or something. There's a pretty much even gap, like probably 1/4 inch from here to the sensor and then from the ear to the nipple. So there's a gap all the way around it. If it's straight up, this unused screw hole will be touching that port and you won't be able to get the screw in. So definitely if you're not a patient person, this might not be for you, but we got it in, which means the next thing we get to do is some fuel injectors, which are right on top of the motor. So that'll be much easier. Corey's gone a bit ahead, and earlier we unplugged the coil packs, which we're gonna have to do later anyways. But coil packs are unplugged. Corey unplugged the injectors and then popped the clips off of the fuel rail. So, and whatever this back sensor is, the cam angle sensor back here, you just want enough so you can pull it back. And then when we undo these two 10mm screw bolts, we can just pull straight up and that will remove the injector harness. There is a lot of dust and dirt and stuff in here, so we're gonna try to blast it out a little bit with some compressed air. Make sure all the holes are covered, like turbo is covered and closed up, which it should be at this point. Your oil cap isn't off or anything like that. You just don't want that dust falling into your cylinders. So a little compressed air, and we will get to pulling those. We're gonna take 12 mil, 10 mil, like I said earlier.
Mechanic.
YouTube certified, bro. I'm using the Harbor Freight sockets that I never use. Would have laughed if it was an 11. There's a chance that some fuel will come out of this. Very high chance. So I'm gonna have Corey grab some blue towels and we'll put them kind of in there. Just grab like 4 of them or something. Let's go. I was bullied as a kid. All right. Just gonna stuff them down under, kinda.
And you're good at that.
Half-assedly. We gotta undo this too. It is the oil or fuel feed. Just pull this apart and then pull, because the little red tabs in there are what hold it into the rail. So if you separate it and pull, it will come out. And so will some fuel. Okay. This should come up straight. It's never been out of the CARB before. Man. So the injectors are off. To get these off the rail, I stuck a screwdriver in and then pushed these little tabs out right here. And then to get them off the injectors, we're gonna stick it in, just grab the injector and rotate. And it will pop off. And then you don't need these. And make sure you check the fuel rail that it has no O-rings left in the rail, and there's no O-rings left in the head. So I've reinstalled the metal clip on here. I slide it on from the side opposite of the connector. Just push it down into like a workbench, clips in. Make sure you lubricate the O-rings before you install them. Otherwise they will rip and you will not find out until you turn your car on. Comes up, should go in, just a little walking around. Make sure it clicks. There you go. And we're good. I'm going to lubricate this end as well, and then this will go back into the car. We did go in and clean out all of the injector holes because they had some gunk buildup even though we sprayed it out. So check all that stuff before you put this back together. You don't want any debris underneath your O-ring because it will not seal. It's time for injectors to go in. I went through one more time with brake clean on a rag and just cleaned it all out. This process is going to be pretty much the same. Just make sure everything lines up. We'll pull this harness up and over. The injector should not need to be forced in to the hole. So, a good way to tell is this bracket is sitting on where it needs to mount. So when we go to tighten it, we're not going to be like forcing in the injectors, which if that happens, it could be like an O-ring is incorrectly seated or something like that. So there's a note in the instructions. It says to turn the injectors 45 degrees. It's kind of tough with the ring, so we'll go as far as we can. And it's something that helps the spray pattern. We're going to still leave the coil packs unplugged. Where's the last one? But we can clip this all back together. Don't forget this line. It will be loose, but is an O-ring fit, so you're okay. I'll put the cam angle sensor back in. So what we're gonna do now is pull these and just check the spark plug gap to make sure we're at, I believe it's 40 thousandths or 1 millimeter. And then we'll do fluids, evap, and then tomorrow we're gonna do the tune, the first fire up, and all that kind of stuff. So we need to gap the spark plugs. Had I thought about this earlier, I probably would have just replaced them and gap them. But NCs use iridium plugs, so you cannot put any pressure on the little electrode in there. So however you measure it, be very careful. However you adjust your tension, be very careful. I have the trusty AutoZone quarter. Just gonna start it in. They've all been like 48 thou. So we are around 48. And then I use this thing, which is for K-series, but it's an M14 by 1 1/4, and it is a spark plug gap setter. It's kind of a feel thing, but you just thread it in fairways. And then you drive the head down, and then just a touch and measure, touch and measure, touch and measure. And if I go too far, I'll show you guys, well, I'll show you guys either way, but how to back off the electrode without touching the post. Okay, so that wasn't far enough. So rinse, repeat until you get there. So I went a little too far. I'm at 35 thou, which probably would be fine. But instead of like sticking something in there and leveraging up against the electrode, we're gonna take a pair of bullnose pliers, just set them on the back. Make sure you just touch the front, and then just the slightest amount of pressure, like rotate it. This spark plug socket, actually, it's a magnetic 5/8. Came suggested by Mike Usry over at Flyin Miata. It's very nice because I don't have to drop spark plugs in. And the rubber isolator, you can lose it on a spark plug, and it's really annoying. So it's now tight. Well, it's contacting. So I'm just going to give it, I don't even know how little of a turn that was, a couple degrees. Just double check them all. These are not crush sealing, so they don't have the crush washer like a NA or an NB. So you don't do the 90 degrees tightness. You don't want to, if you feel a crush on these, you're probably using the gun. So coil packs back in, put the bolts back in, plug the coil packs back in, and we are going to do evap, add oil, and fill the coolant. NC 2 and 3, this is going to be a little different. Reference the instructions. NC 1, take this stainless steel bracket, and then you will see on the bottom of this guy, there's a peg and a snap. So peg the hole. Sometimes it's tight fit, and snap it in. And that is your new evap location bracket. So we're over on the driver's side where the evap bracket originally was. We're going to use this nut on the shock tower, which in Corey's case is a 15. Slide this back over it. And I'm going to try to hold it so it doesn't rotate on me. And then this slot is designed for this groove on the evap. That just goes in like that. And then the other end is going to go over like that. We're going to slide that guy over there. There's a possibility that we're going to have to clock this a little bit depending on how the brace sits, but I think this clears in this location. And then don't forget to plug it back in. So we've got oil in it. NCs take like 4.3 to 4.5 quarts. I just go to like 4 and check the dipstick, add some more, check the dipstick. And then coolant, I've got one jug and a little extra of 50/50, and then this is distilled water, so it's going to end up right around a 70-30 water to coolant ratio, which Corey lives in Florida, so outside of up here for a couple weeks, it probably won't see freezing temperature, and it will live in the heated chop. So if you're running somewhere and you live like in New York or somewhere where it freezes, just run 50/50 premix, absolute. Don't run more than 50% coolant. You want at least 50% water or more, depending on your climate. If you live on the surface of the sun, just run distilled water. But 70-30 mix is what we're gonna do here. This is clear just because I topped it off with coolant. Once we run it and get it up to temperature tomorrow, this will blend out nicely. That's a wrap. Tomorrow we're going to pick up with the Versatune and first start, right? We gotta plug the fuel pump fuse back in, and we have to tighten the mount for the passenger side engine mount. The nut on top is still loose. So don't forget that. I don't think it calls it out to retighten it at some point. We shouldn't have to lift the motor up, so I'm probably gonna do that right now. But tighten that all up, and then we should be ready to see if it starts tomorrow. It's full of fluids. Nothing's flooding out, so we will so far take that as a win. All right, it's the next morning. We've got the laptop, we've got Versatuner. Follow the instructions on the paperwork. You go to versatuner.com/redeem, put in the code that I'm gonna cover, but the license number, and it will redeem the code in Versatuner, which then gives you a link to download Versatuner. And then once you open that, you end up with this guy here. So Right now it's got Corey's car, his VIN, all that stuff, and then we're gonna plug it in and get it to pick the car. The tune is preloaded in here. You cannot edit this tune because it's CARB legal and it's locked, so should be pretty much the easiest thing ever. We're gonna take the cable, big end goes into the OBD2 port, little end goes into your laptop. Needs to be a Windows laptop. There's some ways you can do it on a Mac with like a parallel or something, but we're not gonna do that. So I've got the battery hooked up. It is on a trickle charger because this takes a lot of key on time. And if your battery dies while you are flashing it, you will brick your ECU and this becomes much harder then. So into the car we go. So we've got the OBD2 plug into the car. It goes sideways right down there. The best way is just kind of stick your hand up there and feel around for this like trapezoidal shape. It is close to the A-pillar. Just plug it in, plug it into the laptop, and then we're going to key on. So fuel pump fuse is still out. You shouldn't hear any fuel pump priming. Corey's key is under here. So key on, don't try to start it. Should hear all sorts of things come to life. And then on the laptop, we're going to identify my car. OBD Link SX. Okay, this shows up, so this is Corey's information. We're going to install VersaTuner on the car, and then I'm not gonna walk you through this because the prompts on here are very important. Read the prompts, it can take up to half an hour to an hour. That's why we have the charger on. So just go through the steps. Sometimes you gotta key on, key off, all sorts of things. So just take this very slowly. You don't wanna brick your ECU. So once you have your VersaTuner installed on your car, Corey already had it, so we kind of skipped that step on this. You will go to your Tunes tab, and then you'll see, in this case, Flyin Miata NC1 Miata Turbo Kit. Hit flash, again, go through all the prompts. This one's much faster, it takes like 5 minutes. The car will cycle on and off all sorts of stuff, and you'll get a notice at the end that's like your car's ready, blah, 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 finish. So this car is tuned, should be ready to fire up once we put the fuel pump fuse back in it. I'm gonna check the rest of the instructions, and then we'll see if she runs and doesn't leak any fluids. So I checked off as much as I could on the list, but before we put the fuel pump fuse back in, we wanna crank the car for 8 to 10 seconds, 2 to 3 times, and that's just to get oil flowing back in because we've drained the oil out. There's no oil in the turbo, and if you start the car with no oil in the turbo, it will start spinning at turbo speeds before it's supplied with oil. So we just want to make sure there's lubrication in there before we hit actual RPM. So same thing, just key on, crank it a few times, like 8 seconds, gonna feel very long. Let off, 8 seconds, let off, 8 seconds. The dummy gauge on the dashboard will not show oil pressure, so just ignore that because it doesn't show it until the car is running. We know the engine makes oil pressure because it ran. So we're gonna do that now, and then we put the fuel pump fuse in. We're gonna leave turbo blanket off and all that because you wanna check for leaks and everything before you button everything up. So when we get it running, we'll be up and over and around it, making sure that everything is good. I have double checked and topped the oil off. It was a little bit low, which is not a surprise after cranking the motor over a bunch of times. So now we're going to install the fuel pump fuse, which goes right, it's the 15, 15, 10, 10, 15 again. And if you're unsure, you can always look on the bottom of this. There is no incorrect way to install a fuel pump or a fuse. Just I lined the numbers up wrong, so. Double check. Yep. So it should be a gap between the 15 and the 10. Put this back on. Now's the time to keep an eye on things. Power steering reservoir, you know, if the O-ring is leaking or whatever, the fluid might cavitate, it might get a little foamy. And then it's good to have a second set of eyes. So like I have Corey here, and we'll be checking under the car for leaks and just be ready to shut it off if anything goes wrong. Check underneath, more importantly. Good?
No leaks.
So once the car is running for a while and starts getting up to temperature, you'll see things like this smoking a little bit. It's just the oil that they pack it with and like your fingerprint grease and all sorts of stuff. So there will be smoke. Just keep checking underneath for coolant leaks. No spill or anti-spill funnel is great because this becomes the highest point of water in the car. So as the water pump pushes water, it'll push the air out of the system. You'll see it bubbling a bunch. Once the thermostat opens, it should really bubble over. We got the garage door open and we're just gonna let it run, let everything get up to temperature, make sure everything's happy, and just keep inspecting it. But I mean, everything seems to be going to plan at the moment. So car runs great. Came up to temperature a bunch of times, fan on, fan off, fan on, fan off. Revved it up a bunch just to get all the bubbles out of the system. And then now what we're gonna do is put all the panels back on, which is just gonna be the opposite of when we remove them. We won't go through the details of that. Put the panels back on. For this case, we're gonna sort out his catch can, turbo blanket and stuff like that. We're gonna go do the first drive, make sure that we're reading, in Corey's case, 155 kPa because it is an NC1. It's the same applies if you're an automatic. If you have an NC2 or 3 that's a manual, you'll want to log 176 kPa, which is your boost pressure. We'll go over adjusting it later if we have to, but if you are reading low, so if you want 155 kPa and you're at 145, every turn of this wastegate actuator, like we set the tension earlier, is worth about 5 kPa. So if you're a little bit low, give it a turn, go try it again. A little low, give it a turn, try it again. If you're too high, come the other way, back it off. Just a little bit of fine tuning. And then if you do have any questions, you can data log your drive and send it to Flyin Miata and they will review it at no extra cost, which is a very nice feature. So the catch can is installed. We went ahead and did the heat blanket. I'm just gonna suggest following the instructions on that. It's much easier than me trying to show you. It was a lot of like trying to squeeze it around. I used a screwdriver, like a long flathead to push it underneath, the zip tie method to pull the spring over, and then put the back half on. That was actually pretty easy. It's just these 3 springs here. We installed the washer bottle, which technically is ahead of what the instructions tell you to do, but I wanted to make sure the catch can fit. If you do have this catch can, you would need to cut off the tab that goes right here on the washer bottle, and then it will fit. And then I made some custom lines to go intake, catch can, back into the valve cover. So when I took the wastegate off, the spring off to set the tension, it was no longer tensioned because we had to slide this thing down. So I have retensioned it. If you moved yours after you set your gate tension, just check it. We're gonna go drive it. We'll put the hood on it, put the airbox cover on it, drive it, we'll log it, I'll check KPA, and then it should be done, hopefully. So quick on the washer tank, you just plug in their extension harness and then it goes into the airbox and runs under here, and then the plug is just way down in there on the front. So then once you do that, airbox lid can go back on. and it's pretty much a wrap. So film some in-car stuff while Corey's driving, get some impressions, and see how we like it. So we're about to go for a test drive in VersaTuner. If you go to dashboard and then drop the presets button down, load your general performance, and then you should get all of these windows. What we want to see is intake manifold, absolute pressure. If yours isn't in KPA, your settings up in the top right corner, switch to metric, restart the software, and then it will come up as correct. And then to read anything, you want to hit turn on. So now we've got all the values, everything, and I'll monitor that as we drive. So one thing we forgot to do is when you're in this menu, go to your intake manifold pressure. You'll hit customize, select the custom drop down from the installed map sensor, and then you want to enter both of these values. So 54.117643 and your offset to be 1.647. This won't change how the car runs, but it will change what this reads, which we were getting like 77 kPa max, which is not what you want. So make that adjustment, go out, test it, make sure you're hitting your target kPa, make any adjustments necessary. So we drove it. It makes right around 9 pounds, which it's what we'd call boost weather out here. Corey lives in Florida, so he's gonna make less boost down there. We're gonna leave it as is. We can log it when the car gets back to Florida, make some adjustments. It should be fine at 9 pounds. The car is tuned. It's the same map as the NC23, so it is tuned for that range. It's just, how long do you want your engine to survive? If you are going, so like if this car was going to stay here, I would adjust the wastegate so that it is at 8 pounds. And then it has notes in the instructions that if you are at, say, Colorado elevation and you're set to 176 kPa, when you go down in elevation to like sea level, that is much more boost than what you would make at the same wastegate pressure. So make sure if you're driving cross country or whatever, you make adjustments for all of that kind of stuff, either by adjusting wastegate or whatever. The car feels great. First gear is a monster. And then the rest of the gears, it just feels like a factory turbo car. It's just good response, good enough get out of the way power. It's not like a 300-400 horsepower Miata by any means. I think it's like 210-ish wheel. The installation, pretty smooth. My recommendations would be to buy the pre-welded cat. It'll just save you a lot of time. You don't have to MIG it. You don't have to cut it and make sure you cut it right. You won't deal with broken studs. If you were to have a shop do it, it took me an extra probably 5 or 6 hours to get it all done by the time we tapped the studs, fixed the bad studs, cut the piece off, welded it out, did all the fit up and all that, which a shop would charge you less than the difference. But I know I will make it pretty much a requirement if you bring me this kit to buy the cat. Just makes everyone's life a lot easier. And if you're doing it at home, absolutely just buy the cat ahead of time. I have some updates that we're gonna try and work with Flyin Miata on to make a couple things easier, like the oil feed. I wanna make a fitting so that you don't have to remove the oil block off of the side of the engine. That would save, in our case, it would have saved us 2.5 hours of me trying to tap bolts and all that stuff. You won't have to replace the gasket. You want to do all sorts of stuff like that. So there's a few things I want to work with them on. And that was kind of the whole point of this, was to figure out what goes well, what doesn't, what can be refined a little bit. But all in all, of the turbo kits that I have installed, This is hands down the most thought through, and it just works. We did it, we primed the fuel, car fired up, we drove it, came back, car cooled off, immediately fired back up on like the second crank. If you've ever driven a turbo car with like just somebody's tune, it never works that way. So absolutely phenomenal kit. The idea was that Corey was going to drive it home originally to Florida from here, and I was like, turbo cars, I'm not sure. I feel like we could get in this thing and drive it back to Florida right now as it is. It just runs great. We're going to put a few more miles on it today probably, and then ship it back down and let him enjoy it. But absolutely recommend the kit. Read the instructions. There's even stuff that I missed in here. But yeah, we'll get Corey's thoughts on it because he drove it as well, and then that'll be a wrap.
I think it's been 5 evenings since we filmed the intro, and I can honestly say I now have 2 turbo Miatas. This one I love. I've had that car forever. I proposed to my wife in that car. It will never leave. It'll continue to be a project filled with scope creep, and that's why it's back up here in New York from Florida. This car's whole purpose was to be a fun get in and drive daily. As I mentioned, I had no intention of putting a turbo in it, and then all of a sudden I drove FM's development car, and instantly I knew I needed to have a turbo. You turn the key and you go. It's perfect. It is reliable. I mean, obviously we've only driven it a couple times, but seeing what Mike's done with his car driving across the country a couple times and knowing FM's support and what they've built and all the work they do to R&D, like Stefan said, I could drive this car home tomorrow and don't think I'd have any issues other than lower miles per gallon because I'm just going to keep flooring it everywhere I go. But at the end of the day, I think I compare it to, I think it was Brian Scotto's, call it principle of the 3-car solution, not the 2-car solution. You need a crew cab pickup, which I have back home as a good daily tow, do anything I want. I have now the fun get in and go, still sporty car, still powerful, but not like crazy, just reliable sport car. And then I have the project car. As I mentioned, scope creep. It's something that's just going to continue evolving and always changing based on what more can we do. But if you're on the fence, if you want a turbo NC and you want the easy button, FM all the way. I don't think there's a better option on the market right now. Obviously, I have an NC1. It's the lower boost, but I can tell you it's plenty of fun. It just rips. And as Stefan said, first, second gear, it moves. You feel it. And I've had that car. I've gone through the turbo car problems of tunes and starts depending on what's going on. The fact that we just turned the key and this one went, I don't know. I don't think there's anything better.
There's some super, super long spark plugs, so I'm going to show you an industry cheat that nobody likes to talk about. Just get in there with the wobbles. Perfect. I like to go just until it gets a little bit loose again. Golden. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Not even with like a little guy.